now. They were getting messages that it said as private.
Mine said it was set as public. So now let's see if it works. Technology is so much fun, and we're happy to have you here. If you can get in, we're really happy to have you here. And we always, always, always appreciate your patience. Like all of us teachers, we've been doing this for a long time, right? And you would think we knew all the possible glitches that could happen. All of you teachers, raise your hand if there's a new glitch every single time you're on. So we have backups, and we have backups and backups and backups. So hopefully it's working. Mel, can you see that it's working? All right. So it is 5 after. I am going to unspotlight us, and we are going to get started. Have a little introduction for you. And here we go. Hello, quilters. Welcome to the Global Quilt Connections All-Star Sampler Platter, where you will learn from some of the best virtual teachers that are out there. And you'll find out how much fun a Zoom class can be. All along the way tonight, we'll be taking little breaks to give you tips and tricks for how to get the most out of any virtual class on Zoom. Our first Zoom tip is to get comfortable. In a Zoom class, you get to sit in your very favorite chair. Global Quilt Connection would love to thank all of the guilds who signed up so their members could attend this event for free this evening. So sit back, relax, get your favorite cuppa, pull out your PDF notes, and let's hear from our first teacher. So our first teacher today, we would love to welcome the amazing, wonderful Sandy Fitzpatrick. Over to you, Sandy. Everybody, I'd like to remind all the rest of our teachers to please turn off our videos and mute ourselves now. Not you.
Thank you, Lyric. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today. My name is Sandy Fitzpatrick. I live in Cary, North Carolina, and I am a machine applique pattern designer. Today, I do have a pattern business called Hitsy Fits Designs. I may as well just throw that out there. Today, I'm going to talk to you about decorative stitching with your applique. And we're going to start out, though, just by giving you a little quick intro of how fusible applique works. So let me switch you over to my other camera here. When you have an applique pattern, generally what you want to do is use a fusible web, such as Heat and Bond Light or Steam a Seam, whichever is your favorite. My favorite is actually Heat and Bond Light. And I like to cut the inside portion of the Heat and Bond away so that your pattern pieces don't get too stiff. But what you're going to do is you're going to place your Heat and Bond over your applique pattern pieces and trace all of those out. Once you have all of your pieces traced out, then you can take your guide sheet. For example, here's the guide sheet for that one that I just showed you. And you take an applique press sheet and you lay it over the top of your guide sheet. This allows you to be able to see through it well enough that you can then take your individual pattern pieces, remove the paper backing from the back side, and fuse these down one at a time. I start with piece number 1, piece number 2. Just continue to fuse those down with your iron. And then once you have those all fused together, basically you can have your full design fused down on your applique press sheet. And by using your guide sheet underneath, you know exactly where all of your pieces go. Once your fusing is all done, you let this cool off, and then you can peel it all away, and you have your full design all as one piece. At this point, you can now take your background fabric and you can fold it into quarters. This is a 12.5-inch piece of fabric. fold it in half once and then fold it in half again so that you know exactly where the center portion is. And then that allows you to open up your background fabric and know exactly where to place your design. Once you have this exactly where you need it to be, then you fuse it down with your final fusing and you're ready to use your applique stitches. Now I'm going to show you a couple of things that I like to keep in mind whenever you're doing your stitching. If you're just doing something very simple like a blanket stitch, you need to know all of the steps that your particular blanket stitch will do. On my machine, my blanket stitch goes, let me choose a different color here, but my blanket stitch now will go down, in, out, down, in, out, down, in, out. Now on your particular machine, your blanket stitch may go down, up, down, in, out, down, up, down, in, out. Or your machine may have additional stitches and your machine may go stitch, 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 in, out, stitch, 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 in, out. The reason that it's important for you to know each particular stitch that your machine is going to make is because as you begin your stitching and you're stitching along on your applique piece here, when you get ready to get to the corner here, you want to make sure that your needle goes down exactly on that corner piece of fabric. The reason this is because you want to secure that piece down on the corner. So you turn your fabric slightly. I know that my next stitch is going to go into the corner here, back out. I then continue to turn my fabric again and then continue on all the way around my applique piece. So let me switch back from this particular design here and change back to my screen. All righty. And then we're going to talk a little bit about decorative stitches now. So let me share my screen with you here. Okay, so this is a pattern that I designed, and this is called My Favorite Earrings. With this particular giraffe pattern, you can actually do satin stitching if you'd like. Now, I did do satin stitching all around this particular design. And remember, if you're going to do satin stitching, you want to have a tearaway stabilizer behind your stitches so that whenever you're doing your stitches don't tunnel, because a very dense stitch like a satin stitch, you could certainly use a stabilizer behind it. If you want to use a blanket stitch instead, which is what I did on this particular design, you don't necessarily need a tearaway stabilizer behind it because these stitches have a little bit more airiness to them. Now this is a corner of a border. It's actually this quilt that I have behind me. I wanted to create this border so that it looks like a measuring tape. So in order for me to do that, what I did was I took 3 regular blanket stitches, and then I added 1 more blanket stitch that was a little bit wider in width and combined those together. So if you have a machine that has any memory capability or a machine that can combine stitches, this is perfect for you. You just do 3 regular blanket stitches and 1 a little bit wider, and it'll stitch just like this measuring tape all the way around your design. So you can see a little finished design here. Wasn't that hard? Okay, next we have Gorgeous Gourds. This is a pattern, and on this particular one, I'm showing you different gourds in this particular pattern and stitches that I used on this. With this particular one, I used what I call an EKG stitch all along the edge here. And if you look at that, you'll see that what I did was I used a free motion foot on my machine, and I just went back and forth and back and forth. And so it wasn't particularly even, and that's okay with me. I just wanted a little bit, better, more interest that wasn't too straight. If you like to put embellishments on your quilts with beading, you can certainly do that by hand. In this particular photo here, you can use a piece of tape wrapped around your thumb with the sticky side out, dip it down into your beads, and then pick those off with your needle. However, you can also put beads on your quilts by machine. Now, this is a little tricky, so you need to use a long pair of tweezers. You're going to hold the tweezers, you're going to hold the bead with the tweezers. I take the foot off of my machine, and then you use a zigzag stitch. You want to make sure that you secure the stitch first. You zigzag into the bead 2 or 3 times and then secure the stitch again. If you're using invisible thread, you can then go from bead to bead, and as long as you secure your stitches between each bead, you'll be able to just go back then and clip your threads. With this particular gourd, I actually used a free motion foot on my machine, and I did free motion quilting designs in this lighter green area here in a circular motion. And with this area of the dark green, that is a lot of loopy thread. And the way that I accomplished that was by using a tailor tack foot. Now, a tailor tack foot is a foot that it basically has a blade down the middle of it, as you can see. People use a tailor tack foot normally in clothing construction, and they use it to maybe mark where a dart would go. And once they do a couple of zigzag stitches, they just pull the thread away and it's gone. But with this particular design, if you wanted to use something like this, you need to make sure that you secure your stitches at the beginning and at the end. And not only that, you have to be really careful, because if I did not secure this any other way and someone came along and pulled on those loops of thread, they're going to pull those loops of thread right out, because that's the way a tailor tack foot is made, is for those stitches to come out easily. So in order to remedy that, what I do is I use a glue, and this is called Aleene's OK to Wash It glue. This is a great glue because it dries clear. It's very flexible. So you can use this and run a bead of glue on the back side of your stitching here along all that area that looks like regular satin stitch, and it's going to hold those stitches in place for you. If you also want to add additional dimension to your quilts, this is a leaf design that I cut 2 pieces of fabric in a leaf design, and I fused those 2 pieces of fabric together. And then I used a satin stitch on my machine, and that is floral wire. So I bent that floral wire right along the edge of the leaf area there, and I used a satin stitch, and I stitched into the fabric and off the fabric, making sure that I encased that floral wire the whole time. So as I did that, I then have now my completed leaf here and one that is moldable here. I also did that on this particular design. I created this jacket and put the giraffe on the back with this butterfly. And I did that same wire technique along the butterfly edge in order for it to be able to bend out. If I could have figured out a way to put a battery operated thing in there to make that wing go back and forth, man, I would have done that. Okay, now here's several of those techniques together. So here's that leaf design with the wire in it. Here is your tailor tack stitching. With this area in here, I was looking for a fabric that was a gold fabric with some irregular dots in it, but I couldn't find one. So I used a bleach pen instead. And I made irregular dots and washed them out. And then I put cheesecloth over the top of that. And I used my free motion foot, and I free motion circles in this area here. This is a little cactus that I designed, and I went looking for stitches on my machine that I could use. For these little yellow stitches here, I did those by hand using pearl cotton, but these stitches along the edge of the cactus here, it's sort of a blanket stitch, but it goes down and then to the left and then back to the center and then right and then back to center and then down again. So it's a very interesting stitch. This area here for the pot, I used a regular blanket stitch, but I put in pink thread first and then went back and changed to yellow thread. And I started a half stitch in so that you can see both of those stitches equally. This is just a little succulent plant. And with this particular one, I used a stitch on my machine that I call a feather stitch. It angles out to each side. So this adds another little bit of interest. This one, this barrel cactus here, now we have all of these decorative stitches on our machine and we don't really know what to do with them half the time. So you can look for additional stitches that might give it additional prickliness. On this particular one I was looking for. Now keep in mind, remember how we talked about how you need to know exactly what your stitches are going to be doing, as we did with that blanket stitch. You also need to know, when you're using decorative stitches on your machine, exactly what the next stitching is going to be as you get closer to the end of your stitching, because you don't want to run the risk of getting close to the end of your line of stitching and your machine wanting to continue on with that stitch, when in reality you need to know exactly when to stop. So here we are, we stopped just in time and it worked out perfectly. Okay, so, oops, why did that start over? Let me go down here. My thing is glitchy. Just keep going. Okay, so
And
here's my
you have a minute and a half left.
Got it. I got a timer going. So this is my information. I would love to come Zoom with you. You would be inviting me into your home. I would invite you into mine. You can contact me at hissyfitsdesigns.com, or you can send me an email at sandy@hissyfitsdesigns.com. We are thoroughly enjoying all of this time that we're getting to spend with you in your home, and I hope to be able to come and have some fun with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandy. We have time for just a question or two. There were some good ones in the Q&A. Does the blanket stitch secure the edges enough so that the fused pieces don't fray when they're washed? Or is the decorative stitch better used for art pieces that will not be washed?
The blanket stitch does secure it enough so that if you want to wash your quilt or your whatever you've got it on, it does secure it enough, because you've got that fusible right along the edge there that's going to hold those fibers in place. Certainly decorative stitches as well will hold those stitches in place just as easily. So sure.
Very good. We had several questions. What tablet and app are you using? Because they think that was really cool.
Oh, thank you. This is an iPad, and I used an app called Procreate with an Apple Pencil, and it allows you to draw right on the tablet and everything. So yes, it is very cool.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else who has questions, Sandy will hop on chat in Zoom and on YouTube afterwards so that she can answer any of your questions. Thank you so much, Sandy.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Next up, all throughout the day, we are going to have tips and tricks for you for how to make your Zoom class a better experience. Except for that was the wrong one. Let me get it going. Here we go. If you've never taken a Zoom class before, it couldn't be easier. If you're going to watch it on a device, you need to download the Zoom app. If you're watching on a desktop, you can also download the app there. You don't have to sign up for an account. You don't have to enter your email and do anything. Just wait for the email with the link from your guild, click on it, and it will ask you to allow your device to open Zoom. You do have to say, yes, I allow you to open Zoom. And then sit back, relax, and enjoy your class. It's a good idea to keep that email open and handy. If for some reason you get booted out of class, you can just go to the email and click the link again. So we're in the middle of class, we're talking to each other, you're logged in on one device. What happens, sometimes you actually do need to log in on two devices. I have students all the time who log in to view the course on the biggest screen they have. but that screen might not have a webcam. So they can see you, but you can't see them. So they'll log in on a second device that they can carry around and that they can hear, or that you can interact on that device. But there's a problem that happens when you have two devices logged in at the same time.
Hi, can you hear me now?
What?
The problem. Okay, let me fix the problem. It's great if you have two devices, you can get two views in a class. The problem is when you've got audio working on both devices, that will never work. You will get that crazy echo, which is not desirable. So what you want to remember to do is when you sign in with two devices, only have the audio work on one of them. So right now, my laptop has the audio working. When I sign in to the Zoom, I will get a couple options. I'm launching. You can see no audio is at the bottom. That's what you want. No audio on the second device. That way I will have two views and only one audio. Highly recommended.
What do I love about this room? I set the thermostat.
Did you know Global Quilt Connection is on social media? If you follow us on Facebook and on Instagram, you'll get all kinds of tips and tricks for getting the most out of Zoom. Use them for yourself or share them with your guild. Welcome back. Now we would love to hear from the wonderful Andy Stanfield. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you so much to the whole Global Quilt Connection team. I'm thrilled to be here joining you from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Andy Stanfield from True Blue Quilts, and today I'd like to talk about building a monochromatic palette. I know all of us love every color of the rainbow, and we wish we could use all of those colors in every quilt. But sometimes you may be making a special quilt for a certain person in your life, or for a certain room that has a specific color scheme, or there may just be too much of one color in your stash and you're ready to clear some of it out so that you can go on a fabulous shopping trip. So it's time to make a monochromatic quilt. A lot of people may think that monochromatic, meaning one color, means that you're only going to use one fabric and a background fabric. Personally, I think just that limitation of fabrics would be kind of boring. So I want to spice things up. I want to use as much fabric as possible. So in my world, the definition of monochromatic means the whole color spectrum within that one family. So all the variations of shades, hues, tints, all of the vibrancy that you see within one color family. So for today, jump into your stash and just grab a selection of fabrics. I chose blues from my stash, being True Blue Quilts, that's my favorite. So we'll build a palette around your selection of blues. Once you have your fabrics selected, the first thing you want to do is organize them into light, medium, and dark. We want to remember our basic rules of quilting that we learned from very early on, that we want to have contrast between those lights and darks so that our designs show through. I have a quilt behind me called Teal Universe that is in my book, Monochromatic Quilts, Amazing Variety. And I want to use this to showcase that idea of contrast. This quilt was built around the light, medium, and dark. And you can see that in some places, I didn't do a very good job of sticking with those distinctions between mediums and darks. So I've got some very dark darks and then a fabric that almost looks more medium. So you really want to audition and try to make sure you keep those distinct categories if you're using a design that has such distinct elements as this starburst. So with our palette, we would pull out those dark, medium, and lights. And you want to look at some of those background tones. I may, even though this is a good dark, I may throw it out of this selection because it has those green undertones that don't play as nicely with some of my other fabrics. Once you have your light, medium, and dark, and I'm just going to pull out this one that has more white, that obviously is a good choice for a light, that kind of bright blue for a medium, and then a navy is always a good choice for a dark when you're talking about blue fabrics, light, medium, and dark. And then I need to fill in the gaps. If you think about having your 3 main fabrics and then those blenders in between to get those medium shades, you'll have a good range of fabrics and a lot of interest in your quilt. You can go all the way down to a very, very pale blue, all the way up to that almost midnight dark sky. And I could throw in something like this, even though it's a little bit darker background than this medium that I chose, it has a lot of light area, so it reads a little bit lighter. And we could go with a print that still has that bright blue, but also has some of that dark print on it. So when you're adding the light and white shades to your fabric, you end up on the lighter end of the spectrum. As you add some more of those dark elements, you end up on the darker side of your color palette. So once you have, 5 to 7 fabrics, that makes a really good collection, and it gives you something to build off of to make that interesting monochromatic palette. It's always fun to throw in a surprise fabric. So if you were working with your palette of blues, you might go all the way into those turquoise shades. And if it's something that almost matches one of your other flower petals, it looks like a plant. It's not just this wild color from outer space almost, that lightning bolt of something wild and different. Of course, we all know there have been spectacular subtle quilts that may be all in creams and they have that burst of bright pink or orange, and those look fabulous too. One of my guiding principles is that you need to choose what works for you. And we want to banish those critics and make quilts that make us happy. So if you're happy with that color scheme, that's fine. There's no one, certainly not me, is going to come along and say, no, that doesn't go together. I just find this a good way to work with my fabrics and get some of that coordination going for these monochromatic quilts. The other thing you need to do once you have built your base palette is audition some backgrounds. And your fabrics can change quite a bit depending on the background color you choose. And I've got several here. Traditional quilts tend to have those nice light backgrounds, especially with some of those darker colors. You get that contrast by bringing, those creams and light colors in. You can dramatically change the tone if you put a dark fabric with your color palette. And we've seen those rich, vibrant jewel tones that really pop on a black background. So that could be a fabulous choice for your next quilt. Then you can go, totally wild. I've got a kind of creamy brown here that would be fun. It's not as stark as a white background, and it just gives some fabulous texture. Things like grays and browns can be a really interesting surprise with a monochromatic palette. So play with your backgrounds. I would really encourage you to branch out and experiment with your quilts. The there are some resources if you are new to this whole idea of monochromatic, and I am finding my screen to share, and we will get going here with my little slideshow. Here we go. Okay, so we can use a color wheel. You've seen these in the paint stores are a great place to find color wheels. You can even get those paint chip swatches. That's a great place to get color inspiration because they generally have several shades within one family that you can use to match your fabrics. Then look for those expanded color wheels that really take you from that basic outer ring of color all the way down to the very light shades and the very dark shades. And that helps you see the amazing variety of colors that you can play with, even if you're just looking at one color family. There is a fun tool called red and green color enhancers or color evaluators that you can find, but the easiest tool is our phone that we generally have with us all the time. Snap a quick picture of your fabrics and then slide that filter over. This is just when you edit your photo, slide the filter over to one of those black and white options. The mono filter will take out all the color, and you can see that you've got a pretty good blend in my example there of light, medium, and dark. And of course, you're filling in those medium shades. So we've got some tools to help us. And I play with that black and white filter a lot. Fabric companies are starting to help us out for these monochromatic quilts and their wonderful ombre fabrics. This is one of the newer collections from V & Company, her Ombre Fairy Dust. You can see all those great shades. Of course, there's fabulous rainbow quilt patterns that use many of these ombre colors, but how fun to just pick one and experiment with all those different shades that you get just from one cut of fabric. As I mentioned, I have a book on monochromatic quilts, Amazing Variety, co-authored by my mother. I love being part of that multi-generational quilt family. And you can see a multitude of different designs and styles of quilts, all focused around one different color family. The cover quilt is the teal universe that I showed earlier, and we've explored red, yellow, orange, gray and black, all sorts of fun stuff in that book. And the book Color Play by Joan Wolfram is one of my absolute favorite resources. I learned a lot about color and putting different palettes together from that. So if you are out and about and are able to pick up a copy of that book, you will surely learn a lot from that as well. So I hope you are inspired to pick up, dive into your stash and pick out just one color family to play with in your next quilt and have fun with a monochromatic color scheme. Again, I'm Andy from True Blue Quilts, and I have enjoyed being with you today. If there are any questions, I think we have some time.
We do have a little bit of time. I know there have been a couple of people who want to see the quilt behind you.
I'll get out of the way and give you a half view here. We're a little bit limited on space the way I have my computer set up, but it is available through my website as a standalone pattern as well. TrueBlueQuilts.com. You're looking for Teal Universe.
That's great. Somebody asked if you combine batiks with regular cottons.
All the time. Yeah, I don't have a problem. I will be pretty careful if I'm using the reds and purples in the batik world. Just make sure that is dye fast and has been pre-washed, but I have no problem mixing cottons with batiks.
Great. What is the question you get asked most in your color palette lecture or class?
Oh gosh, I can't think of probably the petite question. A lot of people are a little hesitant. They think that those two items don't play well together, but they certainly do. I would hope that it just opens your eyes that people may have never thought of making an orange quilt. For some reason I know a few people who orange is their absolute favorite color, but that seems to be the quilt that or the color that people have stayed away from the most is orange. And so let's bring the love for some orange quilts.
Absolutely. Definitely for that. I second that. And I also second the recommendation for Joan Wolfram's book, Color Play. It's an amazing book. She is a master at color theory and at explaining it. One more question I'm seeing, if I can find it. How many fabrics do you usually recommend for your color palette? If you're going monochromatic, how many do you need to make it interesting?
I would say definitely 5 at a minimum. Because that gets you your light, medium, dark with a medium light and a medium dark to add some interest. But I'm gonna cop out a little bit and say it depends on the pattern, because if you have a simple block that has maybe a background and a primary graphic element, then you may not have as much room to play. Whereas with my Teal Universe, I have 9 different sections in that quilt with light, medium, and dark in each section. You could get really scrappy and just add as many as you want.
Right. As quilt teachers, we know that the main answer that we give for everything is, it depends, right? All right. Thank you so much, Andy. We really appreciate your time here. Is everybody ready for our next? Thank you. Ready for our next Zoom tip and trip. All of these are meant to help you as students get a better experience from any Zoom workshop that you take. You'll see that the way the teachers are working today is the same way they would in a regular workshop. They're using the same setups of overhead cameras and head to camera shots. And it's only different a little bit for you because with several thousand people here, there isn't room for everybody in a meeting. So we've made it into a webinar format. Remember that you can ask any questions in the chat on Zoom and in YouTube, and the teachers will answer those for you. All right, next up. I see everybody is working really hard. I would love to see what a few of you are working on. Phyllis, what have you got for us? Phyllis, oh, Phyllis, are you there?
Yeah, you can't see me? All you can see is my head and ceiling fan?
Tip it a little bit. There's your beautiful face. So Phyllis, you're in Hawaii, you're a teacher. Tell us about how to get the best view of your flattering, lovely self. There you go.
So your camera should be at about eye level and ideally looking down just a little bit. So
what happens if you're not looking down? If your camera's looking up at you?
If you have a webcam, you can actually adjust it much more easily. But if you have a laptop, your best bet is to raise your laptop, put a couple of pile of books underneath it, and then put the laptop on top of that so that you're looking pretty directly into your camera.
We just love to see your lovely face.
You can also find inexpensive holders that will keep your device at a very convenient height for viewing. They either clamp or sit on your table, and some of them even have a light attached to them.
As a retired physician, I just want to make one point, which is that if your stitch is wrong, nobody's going to die, nobody is going to bleed, nobody's going to get infected, and nobody is going to sue you. So just have fun.
What's great about Zoom is that even if you're feeling under the weather, you can still come and not infect anybody else.
All right, next up, we have Sue Sherman. Can't wait to hear what she's got for us. Sue, are you ready? Over to you. There she is.
Yes, I am. Sorry. Okay, I'm Sue Sherman. Thanks very much, Lyric, and I'm here to talk about Hawaiian quilting. I'm from Newmarket, Ontario, Canada. With Hawaiian quilting, you get a nice, slow project. It's something that you can do while you're talking with your friends or watching TV or maybe listening to an audiobook or even while you're at a Zoom meeting. I am primarily an art quilter. I do my hand stitching in the evenings. I do it watching TV, and in the course of one night watching TV, I don't get a lot done. But over a period of months or a year, you'd be quite surprised at how much you can get done. So here's a couple of quilts that I've completed. There's also this one that's behind me. I only lived in Hawaii for a couple of years, so I don't claim to be an expert on Hawaiian quilting or on Hawaiian culture, but I can tell you that armed with a few needle skills and an authentic pattern like what you can get at poakalani.net, you can do some very pretty things. So let's get going. If you're going to be stitching along with me today, you will have cut out the pattern that is included on the PDF handout that you received. You will have cut out your quilt top and pinned it onto the background, and you'll have 2 needles threaded with different colored threads and some small sharp scissors. You'll notice that I'm right-handed, so I'm going from right to left around my quilt, and that's counterclockwise. If you're left-handed, you're going to want to go left to right around the quilt. That's clockwise. And we're going to just start by basting this little amount that's shown here in red on the screen. We're going to baste and applique that little bit, and that will give you all the skills that you need to complete this applique quilt top. So for basting, please pick up your pinned quilt top and your needle that's threaded with contrasting thread, and let's get going. You put the needle in through the top. That's so that the knot is on the top. It's easier to take out. If you're right-handed, you're going to start with the at the bottom of this deep cut on the right of the point. If you're left-handed, you'll start with the one on the other side of the point. If there's a pin in your way, you might want to just take that out. So we're going to be basting 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And I like to keep my basting just as close as I can to exactly 1/4 inch away. And you'll notice when we get to the applique why I do that. I also like to keep my stitches as close as I can to exactly 1/4 inch long. And you might think that that's a little bit fussy, but again, when we get to the applique, you'll see why I think that doing my nice, neat, and even applique basting stitches makes it easy when I do the applique. You'll also notice that I'm doing this on a table. That's really just for the focus of the camera. You'll probably find that if you pick it up from the table, or perhaps if you do it on your lap, that it will be more convenient for you. As we're getting close to the end of this little segment on the basting, I'm going to ask that however far you get when we finish this segment, please just stop basting and take your needle out. You can leave the thread hanging, and that'll be fine. So now the next thing that we're going to do is start the applique. So take your other needle. That's the one that's threaded with the thread that's the same color as your applique quilt top. And you're going to insert the needle underneath. So it's from underneath the applique, halfway between the basting stitch and the edge. So 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. You're doing it from underneath, and your knot is going to get caught in the folded under edge. And I'm just going to show you this little bit again. You're putting the needle in from underneath. It's halfway between the basting stitch and the edge, and your knot is going to get caught up in the fold so that when you fold the fabric under, your knot is hidden away. So you're folding under 1/8 of an inch, and now you're putting your needle in through the background and out through all the layers. You'll notice that my 1/8 of an inch folded over edge is exactly half of the distance between the basting stitch and the edge. And here's why I think my nice, neat, even basting stitches really help, because all I have to do now is fold under so that my edge meets my basting stitches and everything just lines up perfectly. I've got a nice smooth edge, and my turned under edge is 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm just going to go back and show a little bit of that again. And I'm hoping that those of you who are stitching along with me have already started doing this. We're going to be putting the needle in through the back and out through all of the layers, in through the background and out through all the layers. This is just a standard invisible web stitch that you've probably done before. And you'll notice that we're going around an outer curve. With this outer curve, we're just scooching all the fabric under there. So there's a little bit of fullness in the seam allowance, and we're just kind of scooching it under using the needle and your fingernails or whatever you need to make it lie nice and flat and to have our folded over edge be nice and even. So that was an outer curve. Now we're coming to an inner curve. And with this inner curve, we're going to just clip it just a little bit, 1/16 of an inch. And with this 1/16 of an inch clip, no more than that. If you clip it too much, you end up with your folded over edge gets a little jerky, and you don't want that. You want a nice smooth edge. So we've clipped it 1/16 of an inch, and that just gives a little expansion to the turned under edge, and it can now lie nice and flat underneath our applique. So we continue with the needle going in, and then in through the background, out through all the layers. My stitch length is about 1/8 of an inch long, maybe a touch longer than that. Now, normally at around this time, somebody's going to be asking what kind of thread I'm using. And I can tell you that the whole time I lived in Hawaii, I don't think I ever heard anybody talk about what kind of thread they use for traditional Hawaiian applique. Traditionally, I'm sure people just used whatever kind of thread that they had handy that matched the applique color near enough. Personally, if I have a choice, I would prefer to use a fairly fine cotton thread. And I also like to use a fine needle, but that's really just a personal preference. So now we're going towards this point. It's an outer point, and we want to get to within 1/8 of an inch of it. And now one extra stitch, and that just anchors our point. And now we're coming to, now we've turned it around, and you'll notice that we're just going to clip off just this little triangle that sticks out. And you don't want to clip off any more than that, because you'll end up with some raw edges you can't deal with. So now we're going to fold this point under and fold it under as close as we can get to that stitching line we just did. And now the secret, we're going to fold it under again. So we folded it under twice. There's really quite a lot of layers of fabric under our little point, but because they're neatly folded, they really, they lie nice and flat, and we have quite a nice pointy point. And I'm just going to show that again because there's a lot going on. So we're folding under our point after we've clipped off that little triangle. And now we're folding it under a second time. And notice that I'm using the needle to do this. Really, the needle is the best tool. You've got really good, good control with the needle. And that's why it's called needle turn applique. I'm mostly using the needle as my main tool. And now we're doing 2 extra stitches in here. That's anchoring our stitches down. And now we're moving on to the next little bit, which is again an inner curve, and we're clipping that just to 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to repeat the rule for curves. If it's an outer curve like this, we're just going to stitch it. Now, if it's an inner, sorry, I'm just going to go back to that. If it's an outer curve, you're just going to turn it under and stitch it and scooch all the extra fullness underneath. If it's an inner curve, you're going to clip it to a 1/16 of an inch. And sorry, doesn't matter how many times you practice these things, you're gonna end up making a mistake. Okay, if it's an inner curve, you're gonna clip to a 1/16 of an inch, and it doesn't matter how tight the curve is, it's always a 1/16. But if it's a tight curve, you want your clips closer together. If it's a gentle curve, you want your clips further apart, but always a 1/16 of an inch. Now, as we're going, normally when I'm doing this class, I've got 2 or 3 hours just to talk about the applique. There's lots of time for socializing. We're talking to our friends. And that's really, Hawaiian quilting is a very social activity. I also like to throw in some things, some memories from when I lived in Hawaii. I might talk about the Merry Monarch Festival, which is where you see the real hula, not the hula they do for the tourists. And this is a statue of King Kamehameha I, which is Kamehameha the Great, who unified the islands in the 18th century. And on Kamehameha Day, which is a state holiday in Hawaii, they drape the statue with leis. These are real leis. They're handmade and they're real flowers. So if you stand downwind of them, it really is a divine smell. And there's a lovely ceremony with traditional dancers and dignitaries, and the firefighters come with their big cherry pickers and they drape the leis over the statue. This is something that you can see the statue in downtown Honolulu or in Hilo anytime you're there, but only if you're there on Kamehameha Day will you see it draped with all those leis. I also like to talk about things like animals, the Hawaiian monk seal or the honu, the Hawaiian sea turtle, or perhaps the shells of ni'ihau, some things that remind me of Hawaii. Now, we've done the outer curve and we've done an inner curve. We've done an outer point. The last skill we need to learn is the inner point. And I'm just going to scooch this along a little bit. As we're coming towards the inner point, we're continuing to turn our edge under by 1/8 of an inch. So still always turning under 1/8 of an inch just to meet that facing stitch in through the background and out through all the layers. And as we get close to that inner point, you'll notice that our turned under edge just naturally curves up. So the amount of turn under, you can't turn under 1/8 of an inch as you get right into that point. And there's just a natural curvature to the way it goes up into the point. And you want to go with that natural curvature. You don't want to have anything be pulled or anything like that. You want everything to lie nice and flat. So you're going to do some extra stitches as you get to the point, then one stitch, an anchoring stitch right in the point. And now as you come out, you're going to do the exact same thing. So you're folding under 1/8 of an inch for your next area of edge, but it's going to curve up towards that point. So you're going to work with that curve, do a couple more anchoring stitches, and then continue on with your applique. You'll notice that the inner point is not very pointy, and that's really you're not going to be able to achieve a very pointy point for your inner points. But what you want to do is try to make it so that they're all the same on your piece. So normally I'd say come back in 2 or 3 weeks and we'll talk about how to do the quilting. But of course, I've got about a minute to teach you how to do that. So here goes. First, you're going to iron. After you finish doing your applique, you're going to iron it, and then you're going to make a quilt sandwich. Now, for this style of quilting, we really want our quilting echoes to stand out, and the way we do that is by using a high loft batting. In Hawaii, a lot of people use polyester batting. It's quite warm there. I live in Canada where it's colder, and I prefer to use wool batting, which is the other high loft batting. One of those is a good choice. Then you're going to thread baste your piece and you're going to put it in your quilting hoop. The pattern that you've got does show you how to do the quilting within the leaf. You're also going to quilt in the ditch around the leaf and then echo quilt on the outside of the leaf with your echoes about a finger's breadth apart. When you get towards the edge, you'll notice that you really can't quilt right up to the edge while your piece is in your hoop. So that's where this elastic comes in. You're going to take about 3 pieces of fairly thick elastic and 3 safety pins. You pin the elastic on at the top, then the elastic goes around the outside of the hoop, and the same elastic, the other end, you're pinning it in the same pin, and it'll hold nice and flat if you put a few of these in, and you can quilt right out to the edge. So if you happen to be interested in doing a full-length version of this class, all of this information is on your handout, and it's also available on my website, SueShermanQuilts.com. Please email me with the requested information, including your choice of dates and time for the class. You can do your choice of one of these 3, which are my own designs of quilt, but I also, with the permission of Poakalani, they have allowed me to use some of their smaller beginner quilts for my classes. Mahalo for your time today, and happy quilting.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was awesome. We would like to remind all of our viewers that we have a website, globalquiltconnection.com. If you go to that website, we have a list of all of the Global Quilt Connections and teachers, including the ones that you see here. You can download a spreadsheet that has all of the teachers listed by the technique they teach, by where they are in the world, by whether they offer public enrollment courses. So you don't have to wait for your guild to hire you. Next up, we have another fun tips and tricks for Zoom classes.
Can you see?
All right, friends, your teacher is going to want to see what you're working on. And one of the easiest ways for you to do that is hold it up to the screen. But let's go through this. Beth, show us how to hold your block up to the screen in a way that doesn't make anybody seasick, in a way the teacher can see it. All right, so notice she's holding it up by her face. She's holding it with good light on it, and she's holding it really still for a long time. That really helps.
So I'm holding a piece of fabric, but since I have my virtual background turned on, it's coming in and out of the camera. So I need to be really careful to either turn off my virtual background when I'm trying to demonstrate or hold something up for the instructor, or hold it right in front of my body so that I have a background for what I am trying to show.
Of course, some of us have design walls or something hanging behind us that we can put our blocks on and we can show the teacher. But if you don't have a design wall, you can just take a piece of white board, cardboard, something like this. Notice I was holding it too close, backing up, and just put a piece of batting over it and hold up your block like that. It's just a 14-inch size piece of fiberboard with a piece of plain batting on it. And now the teacher can see what I want to show her or him.
So when we are teaching, we love to see your work and we love to show your work to everybody. So as a teacher, we will spotlight you so that everybody can see your gorgeous work that you did in class. After we're done spotlighting, there's a little button right here at the top of your screen, and it says view. If you click on that, you manually have to go back to gallery view. Otherwise, it just stays in speaker view.
What I love about Zoom is no cancellations due to weather.
I'm going to toss in one more since we have a minute.
sends you an email before class. Make sure you open it and print out any attachments and handouts that she may have sent you. You're going to need them in a good place to refer to during class.
So this is going to be a lot of fun for all of us, and we want you all to enjoy your time in our Zoom class.
What I love about Zoom is that I don't have to share a table.
So many of the workshops that I teach use templates that I email ahead of time. And one thing that's helpful for being prepared for a Zoom workshop is printing out those templates in the right size. Many printers will default to scaling what's in the document. It may make it larger or it may make it smaller. So I'd like to share a screenshot with you of the exact thing that you need to select on your computer to get your templates to print out correctly. It may look a little different depending on what kind of device you have, but the wording should be similar. So this is a screenshot of an Adobe Acrobat Reader. And when I asked my Adobe Acrobat Reader to print, I need to be sure that it says actual size like it does there. If it says fit, like there with the red circle around it, then my document's not going to print the way that the designer or the quilt teacher intended for it to be printed. So be sure that it says actual size.
We're here to have fun. Let's all have a great time together.
If you happen to have already taken a class with one of our Global Quilt Connection teachers via Zoom, we would love it so much if you went to globalquiltconnection.com and filled out our review form. We love nothing more than being able to send glowing compliments to our teachers. It just makes their day. It also does them a huge favor by letting them show other guilds who might want to hire them how really wonderful they are. We want to let you know that at globalquiltconnection.com, under the Guild resources, which are available to any regular quilter, we have a ton of frequently asked questions about Zoom classes. Links to each of these tips and trips will be there sometime on Monday when we get them up. But it's a great resource for you as a quilter who wants to take Zoom workshops. Next up, we have Ellen Lindner. We're so happy to have you with us. Over to you.
Okay, let's see here. There we go. Let me just spotlight myself here. Who can argue with the spotlight? My name is Ellen Lindner from adventurequilter.com. And over the last year, I've taught dozens of Zoom classes and lectures, and it's just been so wonderful because we've still had all of the camaraderie and the thrill of learning that you would expect from an in-person class. So I think maybe Zoom is here to stay, and I'm looking forward to doing some more Zoom events. I do have 6 classes and 3 lectures that I present via Zoom, and you can find that information on my website. But what I'm teaching you today is just a little bit different, and I'm teaching you my favorite way to finish a quilt, and that is with a facing. This, by the way, is a sample for one of my classes, Love It and Leaf It, and it has a faced edge. A facing is a way to finish the edge of a quilt without any visible additions. So we don't see the line of a binding or the line of a satin stitch. It's just a nice clean seam where the front meets the facing. My favorite way to do it is a facing that covers the entire back, and that's what I'm going to be showing you today. However, I have a free online class about facing. There's a link in your handout, and you'll see not only this technique, but some others as well as some tips. Now, I have my setup set today exactly the same that I would for a class. I've got a second camera over here on the side. So let me get the light turned on there, and then I'm going to go ahead and spotlight that camera. so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're going to be doing this, a sample of this one right here. Now, I was talking about the binding. You know, imagine if you had a binding on this quilt. It's approximately the width of my pencil here. And you can see that that's a very large visual element in a small quilt. So the small quilts was the thing that got me interested in facings way back when. And I started doing them because I wanted to get rid of that visual line. Another thing about that is, you know, right now I see this croton leaf running off the edge very nicely. But if there were a black line of binding, for instance, well, then it's just running into a black line, which doesn't appeal to me as much. So that's another reason to shift from maybe using a binding. We're talking art quilts. Instead of using a binding, using a facing. Another thing that you can do with facing is you can do things that have unusual shapes. I'm not going to demo that, but again, it's in the free class that I've given you the link to. So here's my sample, and you can either quilt, and we just got a little sample here, you can either quilt before you add the facing or after. I prefer to do it before. So here's my little sample that's been quilted. It's already got the facing semi-attached. I'm going to turn it back right side out. Did I say that right? No, wrong side's out. And so you can see what I've done. The basics of this technique are extremely straightforward. You've probably even done something similar, but I've got a few tips and tricks that will make it especially useful for you. So this one where you're covering the entire back is sometimes called a pillowcase technique, or envelope, or escape hatch. It's got a bunch of different names, but it basically means we're going to cover the entire back. So what you would do, you would take your quilted or unquilted quilt, whatever your preference is, and you would cut your facing to the exact same size of your trimmed quilt. Trim the quilt, cut the facing to match. Then I'll tell you the basics, and then we'll come back with some tips. So the basics are, you pin it right sides together, and then you just go around the edges, stitching with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and then you cut a slit in the middle so that you can turn it right side out. We're going to improve upon that just a little bit. First, we're going to improve upon these corners. You know, we like our corners to be nice and sharp when we're doing something like this, and so I have a tip on that. It's counterintuitive. You would think that if you want to make your corner sharp, you should stitch it sharp. But instead, there's a lot of bulk in the seam allowance when you do that. So instead, this is a better technique. Stitch almost up to the corner, then turn at a 45-degree angle and shorten your stitch length way down. I shortened mine to a 1 on my Bernina. Take 4 little tiny stitches, then turn the remaining 45 degrees, raise your stitch length back up to normal, and continue. Then later, come in here and lop off that seam allowance at an angle like this. And this will get rid of quite a bit of bulk of fabric, and that will allow you to get your little poking tool in there and get yourself a nice sharp point. Another tip that we can do is to prepare this facing as thoroughly as possible before attaching it to the quilt itself. So that means you can sew a label on by machine in advance. You can sew a sleeve on by machine in advance. And I do no hand stitching at all when I finish my quilt because of using this technique. Another thing we can do is improve upon this slit. I mentioned just cutting it. Well, why not go ahead and cut it nice and smooth in advance with your rotary cutter? And let's take it one step further. Let's go ahead and put some fusible web in there. And I think maybe you can see that here if I move it around. So go ahead and put some fusible web in the area where you expect to put your slit. Can you see that little bit of reflection there? I think you can. And then do your slit in advance. Do orient it the same direction as your quilt. So we're doing all of this in advance. We've added our fusible, We've cut our slit. If desired, we've added a label. We've added a sleeve. We've sewn everything on. I just bumped my camera, but I think you can see still okay. All right, so all of that is done, and we're ready to turn it right side out. So get in there with your favorite little poking device. I know you've got one. So maybe a pen with the cap on, or a dull pencil, something like that, to get in there and poke your corners to get that looking nice and crisp if you can. Now, when you finish, this is going to be a big puffy thing, and you're going to think initially that maybe you've done something wrong, but that's not the case. We just need to put a little effort into getting that facing, this brown fabric, to getting that facing to roll to the back. There is a somewhat tricky technique that you can do, and I explain that in the free class as well, and you can try it or not. That's up to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to iron this from the front to get this edge to roll back. However, remember that there's fusible right here in the middle, so you don't want to iron in that area until you get really ready to. So I'm right-handed. So I'm going to come along. I'm going to work on this edge away from me. I'm going to come along with my iron in my right hand, and with my left hand, I'm just going to roll that fabric to the back and come along and iron it, and continue doing that all the way around until I get that facing ironed to the back and I'm not seeing it anymore on the front. At that point, I'm ready to turn it over. And probably there's going to be some wrinkles and so forth in here. So you can iron this part, but again, don't iron here in the middle where you've got that fusible. So you can iron this part. Now, once that's all nice, you're ready to close up the slit. By the way, you can see that label, you can see that sleeve, all of that's already been done. Chances are good that you have enough fullness in your facing that you can just ease this slit closed, and with the fusible in there, you'll be able to just close it up with just a little bit of overlap. So just start easing that fabric over. Don't iron yet. Ease it again from the other side. Make sure that it's going to work out for you. When you can see that it does, let's relax that side and iron one side at a time. So go ahead and iron that near side, then go ahead and iron that far side, and it's going to overlap just a very small amount. You only need about a 1/16 of an inch to cover that up. And so it almost definitely will close. If not, you make yourself a little fused patch. Now, one thing that's going to happen, because we overlapped one side over the other, we're also going to get just a little bit of a tuck going on here at the end. I think that's a little hard to see, but maybe you can see it a little bit. I don't find that objectionable, so I suggest that you try it, and then if you do find it objectionable, then you would use one of the other facing techniques. One thing I want to mention, this slit has been finished with a buttonhole edge, but that's only because it travels around with me as a teaching sample. In reality, I would have just cut through that fusible and it would be good to go. So once we get that all closed up, it's done and you have a nicely faced quilt. I love that technique. Now there are other options. And for instance, you can do a facing that's more of a border or a frame. This is especially handy if you want to show off quilting that you've previously done. And these techniques are in the free facing course that I have online that I gave you the link for. This one, of course, does involve some hand stitching because you'd have to come through here and slip stitch this facing in place. Not too tricky, but that technique is in the video for you as well. Now, time for some bonus content. When you are making small pieces, and this is, I think, about 5 by 7. Again, it's a prototype for my class. Love it and leaf it. I really like to frame or somehow elevate the presentation of small pieces, because I did have someone ask me one time, how much do you charge for a pot holder like that? So we don't want to give that impression. So by framing it, it's a really great way to elevate. I'll turn it sideways so you can see it a little bit better. Really great way to elevate this little quilt into art. And I have a super easy, I think, elegant and cheap solution for doing that. So what you do is buy one of these combination frame, glass, mat board combinations, and it'll have a hole in the middle for what would normally be artwork underneath the mat. We're going to put it on top of the mat. So I like to buy my frame in advance, and then I can size the quilt to a size that's going to look good in that standard frame, because I know I don't want to get into the expense of custom framing. So I've got my frame, and I'm going to do something very unusual. Maybe you can see in the reflections on this quilt that I did not put the quilt under the glass. Instead, I put it on top of the glass. So here's the glass, and here's the quilt. Okay, I've got the quilt in front of the glass. I love this. It's got all of the presence of matting and framing. It's got the nice shiny reflection here in the matted area and the flatness here, but I get to see all those textures and threads, which of course we want with our artwork. We want people to be able to appreciate it. So I've put it here. How do I do it? Super easy. Scotch makes a double-sided tape. You can generally find it the same places that you find your regular tape, and it just takes a few strips of this, and you can add it to your glass. Now this one has been used for my sample many times, so it peels up more easily than it might otherwise. But I think you can see the fuzzy lines here from where I have added that double-sided tape. And you also see that opening. In this case, it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 by 7 or whatever it was. That doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to be using that opening. I just need to make sure that my quilt is large enough to conceal that opening. Then I add the double-sided tape, and it'll stay on there, forever, unless you come along and try to rip it off. It's very secure. So that's the kind of information that I love sharing, and you'll find it all over my blog and my monthly newsletter and my website. I hope you will take some time to visit my website. I've got a lot of good information on there, some free tutorials about, well, of course, about facing. There's a free class for that. And then I've got tutorials on how to block a quilt and get it to lie perfectly flat. Some ones on design and color, one on designing a border. And then I've got several videos. Early in the pandemic, I got bored and I did a video of all the quilts hanging in my house. And so you can see the quilts in situ and the decor of my home and everything. So that's been a popular video, plus a video of my sewing area and some of the techniques that I use. And there's some very interesting things on there. Oh, and there's a bunch of quilts on there too. I think you'll enjoy those. I do have a monthly newsletter that comes via email, and you can sign up with that if you're interested. So those of you who are planning programs for your guilds, I hope you'll take a look and see if you find something that's a good fit for your guild, and get in touch with me, because I'd love to work with you. And to all of you who've spent your Sunday afternoon with me, thank you very much for your time.
It's pretty much perfect timing, Ellen. Thank you.
Okay.
Good girl. So we have a quick message from our sponsors, and then we would like every single one of you to get up, dance, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, do something besides sitting and looking at your screen. So quick message from one of our sponsors.
I gotta put the meat
And everybody.
She's taking a break.
All right, Ellen, put yourself on mute too.
I don't know.
We need to know these things as well. Now let's hear a word from our fabulous sponsors. I'm having my own little dance party here. Fun music. Okay, 3 minutes. Get up, walk around, walk away. Come on back when you're ready, and we will have Karen Miller up next. I'm going to just sit here and talk at you and remind everybody how much time we have left because I just started my timer. I will also just keep a little eye on the chats. So it's really important whenever you're in any kind of Zoom class that you take breaks. That's one of the kind of fun things is that you can turn off your video and mute or whatever, and then just get up, walk around, do whatever you need to. One of my favorite things that I really like to do is do some stretches. So I thought I would do some of those with you who decided not to get up and walk around in the 2.5 minutes we have left. So if you're with me, I do this with my students in my classes. Sit nice and stable in your chair, sit up straight. Pretend you're a marionette and that somebody has a string on the crown of your head and they're lifting it up. So breathe in and feel your spine lift and lengthen, all that space and all that strength in the structure of your bones. And then as you breathe out, pretend that structure is just letting your muscles melt right over your bones. So breathe in, lift and lengthen, breathe out, just pretend you're under like a warm waterfall or in the shower or something. And then you can also, as you breathe in, roll your shoulders up, roll them down. As you breathe out, roll them up, roll them down as you breathe out. Now, when we're working, when we're sewing, or when we are working by hand or doing anything, don't we often end up like this, right? Our hands are all crunched up, our shoulders are in our ears, our head is forward. So it's really nice to counteract that. Kind of just lift and lengthen. One thing I like to do is just let my head tip over to the side. You can help it a little bit and get a nice stretch from your ear down your shoulder. You can also put one arm out, thumb up, palm back, bend both of them back and just gently breathe into that. You can get a stretch all the way down. And how many of you ever stretch this part of your arm? You never do that, right? But it's something that needs to be stretched. Let's go ahead and balance it and do the other side. So gently let your head tip to one side, other arm out, thumb up. You can tip your thumb back, you can tip your palm back. You can bring both of your elbows back if available, but get a good, nice, long stretch. Another thing I like to do is just get a lot of good finger motion, as much range of motion as you can. You can put your fingers together and kind of bend them back as much as you can. Again, stretching out your palms, stretching out the bottoms of your arms, getting everything nice and loosened up. All right, our 3 minutes are up. So we hope you're all back with us. Next up with the Global Quilt Connection, one of our amazing teachers, we have Karen Miller. Karen, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you so much. Okay. Thanks for having me, everyone. I want to really thank the Global Quilt Connection for doing this wonderful event, the All-Star Sampler. So much fun to be here. Let's see, I think you can hear me, you can see me. I'm Karen Miller from Redbird Quilt Co. I would have a lot to share with you today. I'm really excited about talking about a curled feather, stitching it out. I don't know how many of you out there are home machine quilters or want to be home machine quilters, but I would love to know in the chat box if you have any questions, if there's anything specifically I can help answer, please dump it down there in the chat box and I'd be happy to help. Okay, I'm going to start with just sharing my screen here. Whoops, I can't see my share screen button. There it goes. Here we are. All right, awesome. So again, I'm here to share the curled feather. I'm Zooming with you from the Finger Lakes region of New York. Great place to be. Beautiful day out there today. I'm a free motion quilting and applique educator. I've been doing this for many years and I've had a ball over the last year Zooming with everyone, although it will be nice to see folks in person again soon. I'm a master educator, designer, and aura philosopher for Aurafil USA. I love their cotton thread. I also have a great blog with a lot of tutorials out there. I have a doodle book and I'm your best free motion quilting cheerleader on the planet. So let's talk a little bit more. You're probably wondering why you want to learn about a curled feather. Let me show you some places where I've used my curled feather before. Here's a quilt that I put together a few years back for Barry J of Art Gallery Fabrics. This awesome quilt had just lended itself to have curled feathers all over the background. I quilted this with Aurafil 50 weight thread at my home machine. It was a Janome 7700. Just lots of fun ways to use a curled feather that way. Here's another sample I love to share because I acquired for my birthday 2 years ago a 49 Singer featherweight, he who has yet to be named, and I used Aurafil 28 weight thread and 50 weight thread free motion quilting on my featherweight. Even though the feed dogs don't drop, I got some great quilting done on this little sampler, a little table runner. So it's just a great way of adding some interest to your tabletop. And here's a quilt that I made a few years back when I was teaching at Birds of a Feather down in Virginia. It's an art quilt. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner some nice, beautiful little curly feathers over there. This fabric was hand-dyed by my friend Terry Butler to match my Aurafil thread collection, the Subtle Sampler. And she just did a beautiful job of dyeing this fabric. And I wanted to use all my colors, all my weights of thread on this. And it was just a lot of fun to add the curled feather as well. This little quilt here is some that my sister Janet Nichol made. We named it the Bicycle Quilt, but she was inspired by a pattern by Sally Mankey. The Whimsical Bicycle, I think, is the name of Sally's pattern. I home machine quilted this on my Janome 7700, and I used Aurafil 40 and 50 weight threads. They're both pretty fine, so the quilting thread itself didn't take center stage, but the quilt design did. You'll see that happens a lot because I love to use Quilter's Dream wool batting. And in this particular case, I used wool and a layer of Dream blend. So it's like a 70-30 blend. I used 2 layers of batting, the loftiest batting next to the quilt top, and then the kind of a stabilization batting behind that. All right, and here you'll see a little quilt sampler that I used to teach needle turn applique. By the way, I just loved Sue's demo. Everything she did it's just so familiar and it's just so much fun. Needle turn applique is a great amount of fun, but this little quilt, I just added some curled feathers just to accent the leaves on the little cone flowers. And here's yet one more featherweight quilt, which was really fun to do. This was a little gift that I put together with some friends, and it was Aurafil 80 weight thread, really, really fine. Let me show you the next slide. This is how large that feather is. It's pretty tiny, but with that 80 weight thread, you can make some really fine lines that still show up, but add a lot of interest. So that is some ways that you can use the curled feather that we're going to learn about today. Now let's talk a little bit more about notions, because whenever you begin to free motion quilt, it's kind of like, oh, how do I do this? Where do I start? Well, I don't have enough time to take you through all the basics, but a few of my important notions, the ones that are most important to me, of course, Aurafil thread, and today I'm going to be using 28 weight thread. That's very thick thread compared to the 50 weight that you're all piecing with today, I hope. A Supreme slider, which is just a piece of Teflon that you lay on the bed of your machine, has a hole right in the middle so that when you start quilting, your quilt fabric glides easily across the top of the machine. The machinger's gloves, there's a lot of different ways of getting control of your fabric sandwich. And I choose to use gloves. These machingers are very lightweight. They don't cause me to sweat. And so I really like them because they fit tight on my fingers and I can still change my needle if I need to, change my bobbin and all that. So the machinger's gloves, you've got to have a way of controlling that quilt sandwich. Superior titanium coated top stitch needles. I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. Quilter's Dream batting I've been using. They're out of Virginia Beach in the USA here. The wool is my favorite. I know one of the other presenters discussed wool today. Has so much loft. It's very breathable. And unlike cotton, it actually loses its folds. If it's been folded for a long time, those folds will breathe right out of it. As far as markers go, eventually you'll need markers to do free motion quilting, some little markers. So my favorite is a Hera marker. It's Hera, Hera marker by Clover. And that's that little piece of acrylic that's right in the middle of your screen there. All it does is leave a score. It literally leaves a fold or a score mark on your fabric. So there's no chemicals. You don't have to worry about it coming out. It's a great little thing to have. The other two items that I use are Dritz has a dual purpose pen. It has a purple end on one end and the blue on another end, right above the Hera marker in the image. And the blue is water soluble. You need water to get it out, and the purple comes time, or it'll come out with water as well. But that is pretty much a go-to pen for me. And then the also Soline Duo pens that you see underneath the Hera marker. One marks just like a lead pencil, although it's a chemical, it's liquid, and the other pen takes out the mark. So I've been using those for several years now from Soline with United Notions, and they work wonderfully. Okay, and here's the top stitch needle I mentioned on the previous slide. This is a Superior titanium coated top stitch needle. And the reason why I love this needle is because every top stitch needle has a groove all the way down the shaft. And that's all the way down the shaft, there's a groove. And that groove gives your thread a place to hide as it's going in and out of all the layers of fabric, fusible, batting, everything you have that you're trying to quilt together. So that groove is awesome to have. And then the superior eye is elongated. So it's not just round, it's got an elongated shape to it. And that again gives your thread a fighting chance. And the great other part, the titanium coating, don't let anybody fool you into thinking that titanium coating won't allow your needle to break, because it absolutely will break. I can guarantee you that. But it does keep your point sharper longer. And when you're free motion quilting, it's your best friend. All right. So that's why I love that Superior titanium coated top stitch needle so much. Today I'm quilting on a little sampler that I've been using my Quilter's Doodles 28 weight threads to put together. And I use it to teach a Quilter's Doodles class, which is a lot of fun. All right, so before we stitch, we're going to draw this out, and I'm going to just talk to it a little bit. Let's see if I can get my little annotate tool to come up. Whoa, there it is. All right, great. And we're going to start here. So this handout, this image of this curled feather you have in your handout, and the steps are documented there as well. So let me just tell you how I start. When I'm starting on my fabric, I always use one of my marking tools, and I mark this curled spine. So I'll just go ahead and what am I doing? Hold on a second. I'm so busy talking that I forgot to use my pen. This is going to go a lot better. All right, here we are. I'm going to use my pen so that I can actually do it, not my mouse. I'm going to just mark a nice little gentle curve. Do you see that there? Now, the great thing about marking the spine and not stitching the spine is that it doesn't matter if you stray away from it. There's nothing stitched. We just marked it. So now I'm going to start stitching, and I almost always start stitching at the bottom or the base of the feather. You'll notice that I have two base feathers indicated here, and also I have single dots in the feathers that go around the inside and double dots on the feather structure that goes around the outside. That just means to you that I'm going to always do the single dots first, and then you do the double dots last. So start at the base, though, by doing your nice little base feather just like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm at the spine. I'm always going to do feather number 1 away from the spine and brand new, bump into the feather underneath it, backtrack, and then bump back and bring that number 2 feather back to the spine. So this is the 2-step dance that we're doing together here, all right? So 1 away from the spine, bump, back, and 2 back to the spine. Don't worry if you're not touching your yellow spine here. Remember, it's only drawn. 1 away from the spine, bump back, 2 is back to the spine. And I'm doing this end out here. I'm always thinking about making sure my feather is nice and round out here, all right? So keep that in mind. I'm at the spine. Now I'm going to climb up the spine, do feather number 1, bump back, and bring feather number 2 back to the spine. And that's the 2-step dance. 1, 2. When I get done with that last feather inside the curl, I'm going to stitch my way all the way back down to the bottom, kind of connecting up all those feather points that I left along the spine. And now I'm going to repeat that process on the left side. My base feather, remember when you're doing your base, you're kind of putting your wings out. You don't want to start going up right away because then you're not going to leave yourself space for a nicely shaped feather. Now I'm at the spine. I'm going to do number 1, bump into the base, backtrack, and bring number 2 back to the spine. And I'm going to do that 2-step dance all the way up. Now, it's a good thing I'm not stitching with red thread today because this is a little hard on my eyes, but this is the 1-2-step dance. 1 away from the spine, backtrack, 2 back to the spine. Remember, if you have the end of a feather that looks a little wonky, don't get too upset about it because I like to think that with an echo stitch or something later on, I can go ahead and what I call fix a flat. If I have a flat ended feather, I'll just echo it later and I'll make it look much better with a rounded echo. Usually when I get to the top up in this area, I'll stop and ponder whether I need another feather in here or not. So I could go ahead and just stitch a full form feather in there and bring it out, or I could have done without it. But that's the process that we're going to go through. I better get going on my machine to do that. Let's see. Let me clear the drawing. And we'll get rid of the annotation and we'll stop the share. Whoopsie. There we go. Stopping the share. All right, let me flip you over to my sewing machine image. I hope that was helpful. If you have questions, I'd love for you to put them in the chat. Okay, here we go over to my sewing machine. I've got all those tools I mentioned to you earlier, all prepared here at my machine. I'm putting on my Machinger's gloves. I've got a brand new pair I broke out for you guys today. And again, the sampler that I'm stitching on is using some of the other 28 weight threads that I have in my collection. Let me just wheel you back this way a little bit if I can. All right, there we go. All right, now on my doodle sampler that I'm doing, I've already brought my bobbin thread to the top by just doing 1 cycle with my needle, and then I put my needle in the down position. You always want to kind of keep your needle in the down position. I'm going to push my threads away. I've already done almost like an outline of a curl here, so I knew what path that I was going to stitch on. So here's my spine. I'm going to mark with my marker. And now I'm always going to start stitching on the inside of the curl. So, because if I stitch around the outside of the curl first, I'm going to be trapping all this fabric inside of here. And I don't want to have to worry about having trapped fabric. All right, so let's get going. Let's see, I'm just going to put my base feather here at the bottom. All right, and now I'm going to climb up the spine a little bit, do feather number 1, bump into that previous feather, backtrack, and be feather number 2 back to the spine. Let's keep going up that spine, feather number 1, backtrack, feather number 2, back to the spine. Now remember that spine is just drawn. It's not stitched. So if I don't quite hit it every time, I'm not going to worry about it. My workshops are pretty laid back. Mistakes are never called out because there really is no mistake in quilting. We can take anything we do and make it look nice. I'm going to twist just a little bit so you can see. But notice that when I'm stitching on my fabric, I'm not twisting my fabric at all. I'm just moving my fabric in the shape of the design that I want to achieve. I'm doing that 1-2-step dance. But I am going to twist so that you can see what I'm up to. Now I'm looking here, I'm going to put 2 more feathers in here, even though my curled spine that I drew is kind of at its end. I'm just going to go ahead and do something like this anyway. All right, so there's all my inside feather stitched out. Now I'm going to backtrack down my spine to the beginning again. I'm just going to stitch all the way back down that spine so I can start the outside from the base. And I'm going to twist it so I'm stitching toward you so that you can see it. All right, here we go. I'm twisting around. I hope that doesn't make you dizzy. Ready? Now we're going to do that base feather. Woo. And we're going to go up. I'm just going to keep stitching. I'm looking at that time and I might be short. All right. 1, 2. We're doing 1, 2. 1 at the spine, 2 back to the spine. So I'm doing number 1 away from the spine, make it new, bump into that back one, 2 back to the spine. One thing that I like to do is also just put a little curl on this when I'm coming up through. Let's do this little tiny curl, backtrack, and back to the spine. All right. So much fun. I hope you've enjoyed this today. I have a lot of tutorials out on my YouTube. You're welcome to jump out there, and also on my blog. Love to meet with the guild to do some programs, and also stay in tune on my newsletter for some upcoming on-demand workshops that I'm planning out. When I get to the top here, I generally just keep going. Look, there's my alarm. Time to be done. All right, there we go. Let me just cut this thread, which I never do, and show you this great feather here. There we are. How's it look? Hopefully that was helpful. Thank you all so much. Again, it's Karen Miller from Redbird Quilt Co.
That was absolutely gorgeous, Karen. It makes me, you know, I'm not really a traditional quilter and I am dying to do some feathers now. That was so cool.
Aw. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
Well done.
I think I forgot to spotlight myself. I hope you saw everything.
Nope, we saw everything. It was great. All right, time for a couple more tips and tricks for making your Zoom classes amazing.
If you're hard of hearing or if there's a lot of noise in the background whenever you're taking a workshop, you can grab a pair of regular headphones. These don't have a microphone on them. They're just an old set of earbuds that came with an iPod. So it's just a plain set of headphones that works very well.
Honey, I'm on a Zoom call. What do you need?
So friends, when you are using earphones so that you can hear better, if they have a microphone on them, even when you take your earbuds out so that you can't hear what's going on your Zoom screen, all of us can hear what's going on because your microphone is still picking things up. So hit the mute button anytime you walk away from the screen.
We want you to be inspired and have lots of fun with the Zoom format.
Friends, sometimes it's really hard to hear what's going on the computer. Zoom has a really cool feature where the teacher, the person presenting, the host, can go into their settings before class and turn on closed captioning. So it's best to ask the teacher ahead of time. And if they don't know what you're talking about, you can say, go into your desktop Zoom settings in your account room settings, and there will be a click button for you to turn on closed caption. Now, you as the students, if the closed captioning is getting in your way, you as the viewer have the option to turn it off yourself.
What I love about Zoom is I can see what the teacher is doing.
Let's do one more quick one before our next teacher. Another one about sound.
I'll be right there. I can't not yet.
Welcome.
Hey, I know. Yes,
Okay, hi, everybody. During a Zoom class with so many of us, you know, in the same Zoom room together, it can sometimes get a bit noisy. Phones go off, music comes on, whatever happens, kids run through. So we should all know where our mute button is. That keeps the noise in our room from being broadcast to everybody else. So depending on your device, your mute button is probably in the bottom row on your screen. So tap your screen or use your mouse, hit that little microphone so that there's a red. See how my voice just disappeared like that? Mute.
Thank you. So anyway, something interesting us teachers have learned is that Zoom will cancel out the sound of your sewing machine if it's just the sewing machine running. But if I talk and I sew at the same time, hopefully I'm coordinated enough to do that, you should be able to hear my sewing machine. So if you're in a class and everybody's sewing away, sometimes the noise gets pretty distracting, but Zoom may wind up canceling some of that out for you, which would be kind of neat because it can get pretty noisy, those of us who haven't oiled our machines recently.
I love Zoom classes because all my tools are nearby.
You know, sometimes you've got something that you just really need to say, but you've been on mute because your husband's making so much noise in the other room. Well, one quick and easy way of doing that is if you hold the space bar down on your laptop and keep it held down, it might take a few seconds to kick in, then we can all hear you. And then when you're done, you can just let it go and your husband can go back to making as much noise as he wants to.
What I love about Zoom is that I can change my mind about fabrics even after we started.
All right, Joyce, I can't wait to see your demo. Over to you.
Okay, let me thank you. Thank you, Global Connection, for having this wonderful event for everyone to see. I am Joyce Hughes, and I'm coming to you from Kittnersville, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour north of Philadelphia. So I want to thank you for coming. My specialty is being known for dimensional thread painting. And I always get asked, what is dimensional thread painting? And it actually is really just what it sounds like. I am using thread instead of paint on my quilts, just like the one that you see behind me. Thread painting is a little bit involved with changing your threads in and out all the time. So instead of a demo, which I would be spending half my time showing you threads, how I am a perfectionist at threading my machine. So I'm going to share with you some of my photos of before and after and showing you exactly what does the machine and the thread painting do for you. So this is actually the quilt behind me that you were seeing, and that is all done with roll edge applique with thread painting. And what you're seeing, the pop and the color of the threads is coming from my thread work. So dimensional thread painting, just like I said, is using thread instead of paint. And it really is just making your quilt pop and using the multiple layers of thread, and the blending and the shading of thread can really make your quilt be like one of a kind piece of art. And really, that's what it really is an art quilt when it is done. I always hear that, no, I can't do that. And, you know, my threads, I'm afraid to do that. I'm a very traditional quilter and I don't know how to do something like this. And if you are afraid and you don't know what to do, the best way to do what I recommend is to start with a panel. One, it saves you a lot of time, and it also saves you some money of having to use all those other supplies that you might not eventually, know what to do with. What you really need on your machine is we're going to be doing everything in free motion. I use 2 stitches as I'm using my thread painting. I use a zigzag stitch and a straight stitch. When you're using this with the layering of thread, you just see your quilt top come to life. Everything that I'm going to be showing you and all my quilts that I've done thread painting on are done on a domestic sewing machine. What you need though for your sewing machine is a free motion quilting foot. Your machine needs to be able to lower its feed dogs. And I like to use a top stitch 90 needle. What is helpful for your machine is to have a large throat space so that you can move your fabric nice and easily. That extra space is really a bonus. If you like to use gloves or sliders, which Karen just covered with your free motion quilting, you're more than welcome to try that. Some people really like that to get a grip on the fabric when they are moving it. What is really important to me is good lighting, because when I am blending and shading my fabric and with my threads, I really like to see what the thread is doing against the fabric and also against other threads. So this is my machine that I use. You can see that big open space that I was talking about. And I do have an extension tray on it so my fabric can lay nice and flat while I'm moving my fabric nice and smooth against the base of that machine. So here is a picture with my feed dogs have been dropped. And this is my free motion quilting foot. So this is specific for my machine, for the Brother machine. So your foot might look a little bit different than mine, but that is what I'm using. So to set up for free motion quilting and for thread painting, what I do is I layer my muslin, my cotton batting, and then my panel. I'm saying a panel, or it could be your art quilt design that you have prepared. I always cut my batting and my muslin 2 to 3 inch bigger than the panel on all 4 sides. And then I layer my sandwich. This batting and muslin is acting as our stabilizer. We are not going to hoop. I don't use an iron-on stabilizer. By making the batting and the muslin 2 to 3 inches bigger, that is helping with the shrinkage and the distortion that you might have if you would have cut it to the exact size. This way, it allows for less of those issues that you might have. When we're adding multiple layers together on top of each other, you can see that puckering and pleating in the fabric, but that batting really helps, and the layering of that really helps that to happen less for you. So here are the threads that I use. I like to use Mettler threads, and I use silk finished cotton at the 50 weight. And then I always like to use that metallic in there every now and then to get that little bit of a bling and a little bit of a shine. So these are my top threads that I use. And then for my bottom, I like to use the poly sheen in the bottom, and I use one color for my color family. So I'm not changing my colors, like same colors matching top and bottom all the time. I play in the same family. That way I don't have to worry about the tension. If it does pop through, especially you might see that with raw edge applique, if you've layered it multiple layers on top of each other. If it does pop through, by the time you've added your multiple threads together, it will blend in and you won't even notice. So for class, I always provide an instructional handout, and it gives a step-by-step instructions just in case that, say, in that Zoom, you might have a problem that your Zoom goes down and you have to sign back on. You will have a step-by-step instruction of how to, get caught up. I do also use a webcam, but like I said, the time of going back and forth with the threading takes a bit of an issue. And I also like to share a PowerPoint with what we're doing right now. So you see that close-up detailed stitching where you can actually see the different threading. So here is a panel that I'm showing the before and the after. How I first start is I will free motion quilt my background. And what that is doing is also another layer of stabilizing the quilt so that when I go in to add the multiple layers, I'm not going to see that puckering and distortion. Next, I always work from the background to the foreground. So in that quilt, the background was the fence. So I first lay my first layer of threading, and I'm trying to create like a wood grain, but this is really a guide for where I'm going to add those other additional layers of threads on top of it. That base stitching that I'm calling here on the picture on the left is always done with a variegated thread. And I'm able to get the benefit of one thread. With one thread, I'm able to get multiple colors. And then you start to see where now my threads start to get a little bit thicker. And these are done with solid color threads. So right along here, I have a lighter gray, and then adding a slightly darker gray. And I'm creating that wood grain and building it bit by bit on top of each other. If you notice, I am not making like straight lines. I'm following the grade of the wood. And I'm also doing some short lines, long lines, short lines, long lines. That helps to create a more natural blending and shading of threads from one color to another color. Next, I will use this dark color, the darker of the combination. And that is more of my defining stitch, more that I want to give that pop in the color or the definition. Like I really want that knot to be emphasized. So here you see it where I've added some extra color with that darker color. Same thing going here now with the leaves. I've added my base stitching with the green. I know my direction that I'm going. And then on here, I've added slightly a light green to give that little bit of pop, say like the sun is hitting it. And then that last color is that defining stitch, really gives that definition from one blade of grass to the next blade of grass. One thing with thread painting is you want to make sure that you are always going in the direction of the parts, the body parts, the petal parts, whatever parts we're talking about, even with the fence. I'm taking these little short stitches, so short, long, going back with the head in the direction that the feathers would go. And then all of a sudden I got to start making a twist in my colors, bending down to now I'm going down in the direction that the wings would be falling, or here the back of the bird is falling. And also I have to change my little bit of a direction again to where now this wing is sort of cupping into a different direction. Now I'm moving over to the body parts with his chest, and the feathers are now angling back down to the tail. So here is where the finished bird is completed, to where I've had the multiple layers put on top of him. But again, you see the direction that I'm going in. Same thing here is with the iris. So this is still that same panel. I've added the peach on the tips of the iris. So I've added them, and you can see again, they're short, medium, very irregular. I'm not creating a straight line with my stitching. Over here now, I'm starting to blend in my whites, and I'm pulling my whites actually into the peach colors. So you get that soft ombre look. And it's again here where this is finished here, where I'm going from the peach to the white and then into that lilac. It gives just a natural soft blending. Here is again, just showing you with different colors, different fabrics, different flowers. Again, I'm using that base stitching going into the direction that I want my stitching to go with the variegated thread. On this petal here, I started with the white. So I'm going from that lightest color to the darkest, and I'm adding my white and in layers. So I have like 2 rows of the white. If I wanted this to be even whiter, I would have maybe added 3 rows of the white, still going in that long, short stitching. Now I'm pulling in the pinks, a very pale pink. Then up to here on this petal, I started to pull in the darker pinks, slightly darker, still in the same thing, but now I'm pulling my stitches towards the middle, pulling it into that center, because that's how, when you look at a tiger lily, that's what this is, a daylily, gay lizard, that it starts to pull into the center, the color. So here, that darkest pink is right in the middle, just like the flower is. And then finishing it with those little details that the flower has. Same approach was done with this iris. These are just petite materials, but by the time we get our stitching done, that's where you see that shading. Here where I'm talking, if I would just use that cream yellow and I applied it as stripes, straight lines with the yellow and then the darker yellow, I would have like a rainbow stripe look versus a natural ombre. So I like to work with panels, and finding a panel that works nice. I ended up taking pictures of photographs from my garden and then getting them printed. And this way they're exclusive for me, exclusive for my class, and it just has that extra bonus. But they make a perfect way to play and you know, again, saving time, saving money, just playing on a panel. So here's the before and after. So here, the same approach of the stitching is done even on the butterfly. Each wing section, I'm doing that same short, long. You can see it right here. But when you get that overall look, it just looks like a soft ombre, you know, it's soft, gentle, natural blending. Here's some more additional ones of my photographs that I've printed. And you see that pop that you're seeing is all with the colors and all with the threads. And you see how it changes. I also like to add another level of interest into my background quilting. So I could have easily just stippled my background, but by quilting them, so these leaves are faded in the background, but I wanted them to pop out and give another level. I'm always thinking of that dimension and the depth in the quilt. And that's one way to achieve that. So here's another one. See, so I just stippled my background in here, and it's not so much of another level of stitching that I was looking for that I did in that prior one. Another way to get some interest and dimension into your quilt is with the thread painting, but also I use some decorative stitch occasionally, and that gives a little bit of a pop and dimension. So this is with a technique class that I'm adding some more elements of 3-dimensional to the quilt. And you can just see what the fabrics are doing. So here, I like when I have a class, I like everyone working on the same panel. And I would say if you're playing with your girlfriends or a bunch of your friends, everyone play on the same one. And then you can bounce off, different ideas off of each other. On this one here, I pulled this panel, different elements from a panel, and recreated it into one design. What you're seeing the difference though, not only the different layout, but also the pop that you're seeing is from the thread work. And here I use 2 panels. So I use this straight panel down, and then I combine 2 panels to create a more natural look, a more natural drop to the quilt. And again, that pop that you're seeing, the different colors, is coming from the threading. And the same thing here.
Hi, Joyce. Your
Yeah.
time's about up.
Okay, so here is the last one. And then I'm just going to show you real quick before some more before and afters. And that's my contact information if you would like to see me in person or in Zoom. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was so cool. Really enjoyed that. Thank you, Joyce. Okay. See what our next thing is. Go ahead.
So good. I just need a snack.
Okay, friends.
Eat and go at the same time.
There are times when you should turn off your sound and turn off your video. If you're dying to eat, if you're hungry, that's one of the amazing things about a Zoom class. You can do it, but nobody wants to see it. So again, tap your screen, use your mouse, go down and see the little video thing. While you're chewing, while you're eating, go ahead and turn off your video. Everybody in your class will greatly appreciate it.
Hey, excuse me, I have a question about this thing that you were just talking about a while ago.
Hey, do you know where my shirt is?
What?
Are you lying?
Yeah, come in here. Okay, sometimes things happen like that. Maybe you were in the middle of a class and something happens. You might want to warn all of your extra people that you have in your house that you're in the middle of a class and here's your shirt. Everyone.
What I love about Zoom is being able to see everybody else's sewing space.
So there's 2 issues with having a cat and your door open. The cat might come entertain itself across your work surface. And if you shut the door, the cat may try to crawl underneath the door, pull underneath the door to make noise. So if it's outside, you could always mute. What I do is I lock the door, the cat in another area of the house whenever I'm doing Zoom classes so that I don't get that little behind action going on.
What I love about Zoom is no more packing and unpacking.
Did you know that if you go to the website globalquiltconnection.com, you can find a list of many teachers from around the world who are teaching virtual classes. Take a look at what they have to offer and call up your guild representative and say, I want this teacher. They will love it, I promise. Virtual teaching really has opened up the globe to quilters everywhere. We would also love to point you to globalquiltconnection.com. At the very top of the website, we have a survey open right now. We like to keep our ear to the ground in the entire virtual quilt world. What do you as an individual quilter love about virtual quilt workshops? What do you want more of? We communicate your responses to our virtual quilt teachers so that we can better serve you. So globalquiltconnection.com, go to the survey at the top of the page. There's also a newsletter you can sign up for. And next, the lovely Lisa Shepherd-Stewart is up. I can't wait to hear what you have for us.
Thank you, Lyric. I just like to first thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank Lyric, Sue, and Mel for the amazing job that you do. You do a lot of work and you've really kept quilting going. So I appreciate being a part of the group. My name is Lisa Shepherd-Stewart. My company is Cultured Expressions, and I specialize in African textiles of all types for DIY, for sewing, quilting, crafts, home decor, and all that. So today I wanted to show you a really quick and easy, quick and dirty demo for making hexagons, making hexies. They're one of our favorites as quilters, and I've discovered a couple of easy ways to make them. I am not one to use templates and paper piecing and the little cardboard and stitching. That's just not something I would do. So when I found these little techniques, I was really happy to try them and to share them with you today. At the end, I think we'll also have some time to show you some other little projects that I've done with the African prints. So let's get started. I'm going to find my spotlight. There we go. So African prints, they go by a lot of different names: Ankara prints, wax prints, Dutch wax prints, and of course just African prints as they're called, maybe most commonly. They're getting much more popular and they're getting easier to find, which is fun. We have obviously a whole lot of them in pre-cuts and in yardage and all kinds of ways. But they're fun. If you've never used them before, you may like to try it. They're just lively and exciting. A couple of, I wouldn't say rules because I don't really like the word rules when I'm involved in something creative, but some guidelines and some hints for using them more successfully. So we'll go through some of those. And so we'll start with the hexies. Let me just take these out of the way. Now these pieces I took from our 5-inch pack. We have a charm pack of 5-inch squares of assorted African prints. So I really couldn't fussy cut so much. But if you did want to fussy cut, say this one has a nice mask motif, or maybe there's a symbol or some symbol area that you'd like to really highlight, that's what you want to have at the center of your circle. Because as you fold the circle into a hexie, obviously the center's going to be your area of action. So that's important to keep that in mind. Like I said, this one, you may not get the whole mask because it was from the pre-cut and I really couldn't fussy cut so much. But that being said, you can go into your stash and use all different types of things. So to start, we have a 5-inch circle. Now there's a quick formula where whatever size your circle is, your hexie will end up being half that size. So for a 5-inch circle, you'll result in a 2.5-inch hexie. Okay, and that's from side to side. So to get started, again, no templates are needed, and that's really my kind of technique. So we start by folding the circle in half and in half again, just like this. And then when we have that little crease there, we're just gonna take a pin and just grab a couple of threads. You don't need much, okay? So we open that up. And then we have our circle here with the right side down, the face is down because we're folding inwards. So where that pin is, you can probably see it just shines right there. That's all you really, I'm not sure if you're catching it, but in person, you can see that the pin is right there. And so what we're gonna do is take the first side, and of course, there are no sides on the circle, but we're going to make a starting point, and you're going to fold it in. Generally, I do like to just finger press with my fingernail at this point. So we have one side like this, meeting where the arc of the circle of the curve meets that pin. And then we can turn it around, it's easier to handle. And the second side, we're also going to bring in to where that pin is. Okay, now if you're working on a board with lines, you can use that. Generally, I don't. I tend to eyeball a lot of things. So if you're an eyeballer, this is fun. If not, you may want to use, like I said, some guidelines using these lines. Not really necessary though for the type of, the style of work that I do. So now we've got these two ends side to side, meeting in the center where the pin marks the center of your circle. And that creates 4 points. And on the handout, they're labeled A, B, C, and D, very simple. So what you want to do is first make sure that's a little more even. And again, with the eyeballing, I think it's something that the more you eyeball, the better you can get at it potentially. So it's just kind of fun to try it and see how good you are at it. So we're going to start with one of these first corners. I'm going to take that corner and turn it in so that it meets at that center again. You may have to peek under to see where the pin is exactly. But again, when you eyeball, you're just free about it. You don't worry so much. So when we bring that corner in, and we go to crease, we're also making a nice sharp point on the opposite end. Okay, so what you don't want to have is this, where you have a big gap, and you don't really want to have it overlapping either, because then you have the curve coming over the right side of the hexie. So you're just going to kind of wiggle it and juggle it. Luckily, when you cut a circle also, you kind of have some bias room, so you do have some wiggle room there. So I'm lining up, looks like it's a nice point here. So just go ahead and again, finger press. You can also iron, but I just like to kind of have the little economies of time, if you want to call it that. So now we have a nice point on the opposite side. We're going to bring that one in again to the center, and we're going to crease. Now, obviously you've got a few layers of fabric here, but that's okay. You can just crease it. Or like I said, you can use your iron. So you see where this is headed, right? It's not really rocket science, but it's just a fun project. We have the other 2 remaining corners. So again, we're going to pull this one in to the center. And as we're pulling to the center, we're again paying attention that we get a nice point here. This one is not quite a point, so I'm just going to bring it in a little more. Okay, now obviously a lot of the success of this technique begins with having, round circles. So if you have a Cricut machine, or if you have some other die cutting machine, or you can cut freehand or with your rotary cutter, that's the best way. That's going to ensure that you have a nice straight hexie. So again, that last corner, we're going to turn in. Okay, and at this point, you've got your hexie. Now, this pin that was used to mark the center, I just take it out, and from the face, I just repin so that I'm hitting 2 of the opposite triangles on the back, and that will just keep it in place. Okay, the other thing you can do to keep it in place, say if you are not using them right away, you may get addicted to these like I've been, and you may just want to make them while you're watching TV and just kind of have them all lined up for a future project. In that case, I wouldn't use a pin. I might use a little bit of fabric glue, and you want to just dot your little corners here, not too much glue, just dot them so that they stay in place, and then you can stack them and collect and just kind of go crazy making them. So that's your basic hexie. Then when you want to join them together, well, first of all, this is a little project I did. It was the size of a mug rug. It's a perfect mug rug size. It takes 7 of the 5-inch circles, again, coming down to 2.5 inches, perfect mug rug size. And it's a nice way to just kind of sample the technique. If you don't really, if you're not sure, you just want to give it a little try. You'll also notice that I use all warm colors in this one. The smaller the project is for me, and this is, again, not a rule, but it's a bit of a guideline that I seem to follow. The smaller the project, the more I want to keep the colors kind of consistent or running together. So in other words, this is a warm palette. I'd like to keep everything on the warm side just because it has a better visual look in my eyes. And again, it's all subjective. You can also take a small project and do one color, one of each color in the spectrum. To me, it's not as effective in a small project. I'd rather use a larger piece, maybe a whole pillow, if I want to use all different shades of blues or something like that. But for a smaller project, again, sticking to all kind of one color scheme. Here I added, I had oranges and golds, and added a few pops of fuchsia, but again, it's still all a warm kind of a palette. Okay, so to finish this, well, actually, let me go back here and show you how I joined them. This is another one that I started, and I joined all the pieces together, which is really a simple whip stitch. I decide which one will be my center, and from there, I will just, as I did with these, you see I sewed them all to the center, but they're not quite sewn to each other yet. So all the center pieces. So this would be my next one. And when you're looking at how the patterns fall on these pieces, you may not want to have hot pink and hot pink all together. So you kind of have a little bit of choice in, kind of how you lay them out. I'm thinking I kind of like that. So I'll be sewing this centerpiece to this final hexie. Okay, so I just put them right sides together. And then I would take just a little whip stitch I would start here in the corner, hiding that knot. And just real simple sewing. You can also use your machine and either zigzag over the seam, you butt them together, zigzag over the seam. For me, that flattens out the effect of it. It flattens out the effect of the hexes. Like you don't really see them. They kind of, you lose the edges. And that's not really, for me, that's not the look that I like. I like to have the distinctive hexy shapes on each one. So I wouldn't necessarily sew over them as far as, if I wanted to zigzag or anything like that. So gonna come through here. I think my thread tangled a bit, but it'll be all right. Now for this size, again, the 2.5-inch hexie, I only need about between 6 and 8 stitches. I'm not making, a career out of this. I'm just gonna try and get them joined. That also depends on how you're going to use them. So you have to think about how strong you need the seam to be. But for just a quick project, like I'm just showing you the demo, 6 to 8 stitches usually is enough. So I'm just going to finish this one. Okay, so the nice part about doing the centers is that you can go all the way around with one continuous thread, but this being the last one, I just started it. Okay, and then you knot it off and then you're all set here. And again, these would either be glued or you can just leave the pin in depending on how soon you're going to use them. Okay, and then you would go ahead and fold each of the sides together in the same way, right sides together, do your whip stitch, and they all come out joined like that. And depending on how big you want to make it, it may be more than 7. If you're doing, again, a pillow or the back of a jacket panel, something like that, obviously you have more. Just keep joining, and that's just a simple way to put those together. So what I did for the project is, I did the mug rug, which is 7 pieces. And when you have your hexes, you see the edges are all finished because they're folded under. So what I did was cut a piece of batting for the finishing. I cut batting about 1/4 inch smaller than the hexie shape. So I took my batting and just trimmed about 1/4 inch less than the piece itself. And then I used some faux suede, some just polyester, kind of a nice suede kind of fabric, because it doesn't fray. Now you can also use felt for this, anything that doesn't fray would be a good choice for this, but the faux suede is especially nice for furniture too. So if you're using it as a mug rug, you have a really nice finish. It feels nice, it doesn't move. So it's a really great choice. So that's for the mug rug. And let's see what else. Let me just show you this. If you're looking at the handout, I actually use batiks because one of my other favorite fabrics is jacquard batik that I import from Ghana. So you'll see these in the PDF. These are the photos that I used. Same technique. These were 7-inch squares, and so they finished to 3.5. Now, after doing the 2.5 that are really cute, sometimes you get used to a size. I had done these first, and I really like the 2.5 better. So I may stick with that when I do a larger project. But just so you can see that it's a simple, a simple formula that you start with a double size circle of the size that you'd like finished. Okay, but these are and then like I said, the batiks give you a whole nother look, a little more sophisticated, a little more artistic. They all look like paintings, so you get a really nice look with these. Just in case you were confused on what was shown on the PDF. So now we've got that done. I'm going to come back and show you a few things. So one of the things I love about teaching, whether virtually or in person, is showing new quilters how to use these fabrics. A lot of times they're a little bit intimidated because they feel like there are so many colors and patterns and how do they work together. And we relieve a lot of that for you. We show you, again, little tips and techniques to make them successful. This is another little hexie project that I did. And we've seen this kind of a look before with the hexies, but I think the African prints really give you a really different look and a different feel. Just another way to do it. So here we've got the same hexies and we just stitch through all the corners diagonally first, one direction, and then you do the cross direction, and then you sew the horizontal so that each point is sewn down. And it's just a really, really fun little look. Again, this is more monochromatic somewhat, little pop of color here, but to my eye, that looks a little more, just a little nicer. I just kind of like the way that looks. I think, was it one of the other speakers? I can't think of her name, I'm sorry. But she talked about monochromatics. And I think especially with the African prints, when you have a common color, that helps to unite them. So that's one of the tips that we teach and that we show, is that they can each be different, and they are very different. But you can kind of unite them by color because the patterns are so different. The patterns wouldn't really make them united. So it's a lot of fun to do those. Okay, another thing with the African prints, like I said, smaller projects, I like to keep the color schemes fairly tight. But something like this quilt behind me, it's our Ankara string quilt. This is a virtual class and in person for groups and for individuals. And here you're using all the colors. So we really have a lot more tips and techniques of how to make the colors blend, when to use thicker strips versus skinnier strips, and how they all kind of work together. It's a look that we call organized chaos. It's a lot of fun, and it really frees you up. And one of the things I love about teaching this class is that invariably most of the students, when they do their first block, it's very matchy. Like they'll have maybe their favorite color or a color they have a lot in their stash, and everything is coordinated and it's a beautiful block, but it's not the organized chaos. So it's nice watching them in the course of a class kind of break that. By the third block, they're getting a little bit more used to it. And I say, this isn't the kind of block, it's not like these are clothing swatches that you're going to wear. So they're not supposed to match. They're supposed to clash and have fun, and kind of, you really want to see each one separately. So when they get to the second or third block, it's always fun to see their reaction, like, oh, now I'm getting it. So it's just great to free yourself sometimes from all the rules that we have. If you're in a quilt shop and you buy a collection of fabrics that's all coordinated, it's a nice way to break out of that and just really get a great pop of color and excitement.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Is that it?
Yeah, your time just flew by. I
Wonderful.
really want you, Lisa, to go to the comments because you have a ton of questions.
I will do that. I will do that. I just had one, my screen share, just a little.
Go for it.
You know what? Do I have it? Yes. So we have, like I said, a lot of virtual offerings for individuals, for guilds and groups. You can also shop the studio by virtual visit. So it's a great shopping experience. It's like personal shopping meets African fabric, and we take you around and you can get coordinates for your project. I think Lyric is maybe
I vouch, it's dangerous. She will show
fun.
you all the amazing stuff and you will have to have it.
It's a lot of fun. You can either shop as a group, you can get a group Zoom appointment, or just by yourself. So visit culturedexpressions.com, or our virtual site is socialdistance.com. That's spelled SEWCIAL. Either one will get you to us, and I'd love to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. That was awesome. We are pushing up against our time, so I'm not going to show you another commercial. But I would like to remind everybody that, what was I going to remind everybody? Go to globalquiltconnection.com, and there you'll find under the very first thing that you'll see is our teacher directory. We have so many teachers that are ready and happy to come teach for your guild. Even if you're not the guild program chair, if you see somebody here or somebody at Global Quilt Connection that you really are interested in, give them a call. Tell them, I really want this person to come. And also almost all of the teachers offer on-demand classes or online classes that just any old quilter can sign up for anytime they want to. All right, are you ready, Anna? Next up, we have Anna Buzzolino.
Hello, everybody. So good to see you all here. Thank you, Sue, Lyric, and Mel for organizing this fantastic event. I've been having a lot of fun seeing what everybody else is doing, and I'm really excited to share with you paint sticks on fabric. So behind me, you see some of the samples of my work. Lots of different things to do with paint sticks on fabric. So if you've never used paint sticks, they are oil paint on a stick. And I'm going to change my view so you can see what I am going to show you. So here you can see, these are what the paint sticks look like when you get them in the store. So they come one of the most common brands in North America are Shiva. They are also called Marcal in Europe. And they come in two kinds. As you can see, there are two different packages. This is the same thing packaged in a different way. So, but mostly the Shiva paint sticks that you'll see, you'll find them like this. Brown packaging is solid colors. Blue packaging is iridescent. So both of them you can use on any kind of fabric. So you can use paint sticks on any type of fabric you like. So it doesn't have to be 100% cotton. You can use them on polyester, on linen, silk, and anything else, polycotton, rayon, etc. So when you first open your package, your paint stick looks like, as you can see, it has a little rounded tip at the top, and it's covered by a piece of cardboard. So you can actually peel that cardboard if you open them. So you can push your paint stick up and down to use more or less once you start running out of that tip. Or if you're making a large piece of work, you might want to use the side instead of the tip. But when you first get them, you'll find that if you want to go and do something with them, nothing will happen because they grow a skin. And the reason they grow a skin is, so they can, the paint stick won't dry all the way. So it will only dry a little bit to grow that skin that you need to peel. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to use a piece of paper, towel, and just start sort of twisting carefully, and then that'll clear the skin. If that doesn't work, then you're going to use an X-Acto knife and peel the skin off. I can see a little bit of skin here. So you're going to peel the skin off and just clear it all. I did all of mine this morning because I didn't want to spend too much time doing it. But that's basically the two things you do it. And then just make sure that you clean it. And please get rid of those little bits of skin because they will stain wherever they fall. So, and I'm gonna put that away. So you can see a piece that I've started working on, but I'm going to pull that aside now, and I'm going to work on a new piece of fabric. I am using black because you're going to see the paint sticks pop a little bit better. So you can use all kinds of things on them. So here you have a piece of a grid from a DIY store. I have, I love grids of all kinds, so I find all of these. These are all shelf liners from the dollar store. So really inexpensive things that you can use. And then anything that has a texture you can use to work. So I'm going to slide this grid under my piece of fabric, and I can actually just put it straight up. I can put it at an angle. So I'm going to put it at an angle, and I'm going to grab a silver paint stick to start working with it. And I'm going to hold my paint stick as if I was holding a pencil. And then I'm going to put it almost perpendicular to my work and very gently start rubbing against this. So there are lots of ways to use these paint sticks on fabric, but one of the nicest ways to do it is with rubbing plates. And as I say, you can use just about anything to rub with. And you can see how fast that went and how effective that is. So you can create entire pieces of fabric that will be standalone pieces for work. And you don't have to do the entire thing. I could move that a little bit and do some over here. I can do a little bit more. I can do a little bit over here. you get the idea. So you don't have to do the entire area. You can just work in smaller pieces. So let's try some of the other ones. So this one, as you can see, is a little bit thicker, if you can see that, what it looks like. And each one of these will give you a different texture to work with. So that gives me that texture. If I use this one, it would give me a different texture altogether. And I'm doing it very gently because I don't need to apply a lot of pressure to get a result. And then I can start overlapping if I decide that that's what I want to do, and start creating pattern by overlapping my design. I can lift, move that, and then overlap over here maybe, and come over there. So I'm gonna try one more, which is this one. The reason you see that there's paint because I use them for other applications. So these have been used for monoprinting too. So, and I can see what texture that gives me. So every single one of these pieces will give me a totally different texture. And then I can complete that. So that is one way of using the paint sticks with grids and everything else. Every so often, have a paper towel handy and clean the edges of your paint stick, because there might be some small pieces of skin that you need to get rid of so they don't come onto your work. Another way of using them, I mentioned rubbing plates. So you can see if I do it like that, because if I drop it here, it's very hard to see. These are commercial rubbing plates, and they are double-sided. So on one side, you get one kind of texture, and on the other one, you would get another kind of texture. So those are commercial, and they are all kinds of different rubbing plates in different designs. There are leaves and bugs and flowers and Christmas decorations. But I like to make my own because they give me my own unique rubbing plates, and then I can create my own work. So I love text, so I can use text. I can also do very abstract things. These are very addictive to make. By the way, if you look in your PDF package that you received, there is a coupon there if you'd like to learn more and join me for my next class. There is a coupon there with a discount for the next class coming up in June. So let's put the rubbing plate under and see what happens. And I'm going to do both sides so you can see what is going on. So one thing that you can do is, if you're going to work with some fabrics that you may work with, you may find that the rubbing plate slides around a lot. So the only thing you need to do is grab something like 202, which is a temporary adhesive for paper in this case. I also use 505 if I don't have any 202, and you basically very lightly will spray that so you can have something. So when you put it under your piece of fabric, your fabric will stick. So I'm going to change colors and see what can I use. No, I'm going to stick with a silver just in case. The other thing that I want to tell you is, and you can't see it here, all this is very wet. It's just newly applied. So if I put my hand on it and move my hand, I'm going to have areas that are going to be sort of stained. So keep an eye out for that. So gently, let's start working on and see what this design looks like. So you can see you do it a little bit at a time, and usually I try to rub always in the same direction instead of going back and forth. So I try to get as little paint stick as I can where I really don't want it to go. So I can feel with my hands where that rubbing plate ends. So it's right here is my square rubbing plate. So I know that if I grab another paint stick, I can now start adding another color here. And I know that my rubbing plate stain stops right here. So I don't want to go any further. So I'm always keeping an eye of where my rubbing plate ends so I don't go any further. But I can also start overlapping my designs to create a more interesting piece of fabric that has a little bit of coherence. So I'm going to turn that to the other side and let's give it a try and see what it looks like. So I'm going to keep with this iridescent peach. And you can see the difference between both sides. On one side, we are doing the flatter parts, and on the other side, we are doing sort of the valleys here in this area. So you have lots of different ways that you can use these commercial rubbing plates. And again, I can move it over and just do a little bit more over wherever I want to go. Okay, so the same would work with, you know, the ones that I made myself. You know, and they all work basically on the same way, depending on how thick your lines are, is whatever lines you are going to get. Another way of using paint sticks is through a stencil. I'm going to turn that piece of fabric so I can work on this end without touching this area, which is really fresh. So I have a couple of commercial stencils, and I want to do some polka dots. I love polka dots, so that's a really nice thing for me. So I am going to grab my paint stick, and I'm going to apply some paint stick on a tray. And you can use a piece of paper or anything, just basically to rub some of your paint stick on the on your plate like this. And for this, you are going to need a stencil brush. So you're going to apply the stencil from the top. Pick up your paint like this on the stencil brush, and then very gently start applying the paint stick.
Anna, you asked me for a 1-minute warning. It's a little bit less than a minute left.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you can see here you can see that very well. You can also, in a pinch, use your finger. So a few things that I want to tell you is that you need to let this heat set for about 72 or a little bit more longer, because you need to get the oils and the paint stick to dry. So once you do that, you can heat set your pieces with a hot iron, depending on what kind of fabric you're using is the setting on the iron that you're going to use. And after that is done, you'll be able to use it in your work. So please follow me on Instagram and Facebook and on my website at annabasalino.com. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Anna. I do encourage everybody to follow her, especially on Instagram. I love your work. I really love your work. And Anna Please do
Thank
go
you.
to the chat as well, because there's a lot of good questions for you.
On my way.
On your way, great. We are bumping right up against our time. So let me give Brenda control of the screen. Brenda Gale Smith is coming to us from Australia. She's been up since very, very early in the morning. It's all you now, dear.
Welcome to the Serendipity Studio. I am so excited that technology enables us to share our creative spaces, no matter what country we're in and no matter what time zone we're in. I'm zooming to you from the other Copacabana, the one on the central coast of New South Wales in Australia, about 60 miles north of Sydney. And the sun has come up during the course of the webinar. And so I'll give you just a quick peek out the window. It's a little bit glary, but there you can see Copacabana, New South Wales. And when the pandemic came along, I spent a little bit of time gazing out that window and took the opportunity to think about the content and structure of my courses and to completely overhaul them to optimize them for the Zoom format. The result is that I have 5 3-hour live interactive workshops that each focus on a different free-form piecing technique. And the classes are designed to be standalone, or you can have them in a series. My workshops are available for guilds, but in addition, in mid-2021, I have a full lineup of direct sign-up classes that you can join via my website, serendipitypatchwork.com.au. Today, I'm going to share with you a small extract of my geometrics workshop. Geometrics is tips and tricks for creating free-form geometric shapes, triangles, a whole range of quadrilaterals and hexagons. And in the demo today, I'm going to share with you how you can create dynamic compositions using free-form pieced triangles. For this technique, you will need 2 rectangles. In my case, I'm using rectangles for the demonstration that are 12.5 inches wide by 4 inches deep. But the same principle can be applied with longer rectangles, deeper rectangles, shorter rectangles, lower rectangles. The thing to keep in mind is that you need to have your 2 rectangles right side facing upwards. And because I have fabrics that don't have a right or wrong side, and things can get sometimes mixed up in the process of construction, I like to put a chalk line representing the right side of my fabrics. That gives me at least a chance of getting things the right way up. I layer my fabrics one on top of each other, and I'm going to cut an even number of cuts so that I create distinct triangles. In this case, I'm going to be doing 6 cuts from the lower edge to the top edge, from the top edge to the lower edge, point to point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I am going to use a ruler for making these cuts, but the reason I'm using it is to hold the layers stable so that they don't shift around, and also for the straight edge. I'm not using it for the purposes of measuring, and I'm certainly not using it for shifting my angles around. When I make my cuts, I'm going to leave a little bit of clearance, about 1 inch at each end, so that I have some flexibility when it comes to construction. First cut, second cut. The next one, I'm going to make a wide bottomed triangle. And then the last one, I'm going to make a steep triangle, just a little bit of variety. So you can see when I separate them there that I have 3 distinct upward facing triangles and 2 coming down. And I'm just going to transfer those over to a whiteboard for higher contrast. The next step is to separate the 2 layers and to swap out the triangles to create 2 separate bands. And when I'm doing this, it's very important that I keep the triangles in order, because each has their own unique set of angles, and we want them to fit with their neighboring part. So I'm just going to shift the pink triangles to the bottom and then fill in the background with the green. And you'll notice that I'm using pink and green. They're on the opposite sides of the color wheel. They're complementary colors. And so inherently, they are going to create energy and dynamism. Okay, so you can see I've got 2 bands of triangles here. I've got 1 band with upward facing pink diamonds and another band with upward facing green, not diamonds, triangles. When it comes to sewing them together, I sew them together in pairs. And I will shimmy the right-hand side so that it is about, it's not going to stay still, there we go. There's about 1/4 inch at the top and 1/4 inch at the bottom. I'm going to do that all the way along. Similarly on the bottom row, just shift them up about 1/4 inch. The reason that I'm making that adjustment is that I want to retain the distinct points in my triangles. That's part of my design and I want to retain them. So because we haven't cut out templates, this is just a good adjustment to make. And then when I take them to the sewing machine, I'm going to flip them over right sides together. And once again, I'm positioning them just 1/4 inch or so above, and you can see there's a little gap here at the bottom. That's completely natural. So I will transport these to the sewing machine, and I find it's helpful. I often will use a ruler as a tray and just layer those triangle units onto a tray, take them to the sewing machine. And when you're sewing, you need to keep them in order, or at least know the order for rearranging them when you take them off the sewing machine. And so sometimes it can be helpful just to mark before you cut your triangles. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and that's another tool that I have just to keep things in order. When I take them to the sewing machine, I put them together in pairs, and I use a regular 1/4 inch seam going right down the side. And I'll do that with all those pairs, and I'll have this loose piece left over at the end. After I've sewn my seams, I press them, and I have, in this case, I've used the patchwork rule of pressing towards the dark, but you might choose to press all your seams in one direction to distribute the bulk. Both systems work. When you do press, you'll notice that you end up with some little tails here, little airs on the edges. We need to remove those little tails before we join the seams together. And to do that, you can either use scissors and cut the tail like so, or you can just use your rotary cutter and just eyeball it and cut the tail. In both cases, you're wanting to keep that line extended in a straight fashion. After you've removed all your tails, then it's just a matter of joining those segments together. And you can see there that they will join, and I've got a very distinct point. I have lots of clearance. At this point, we don't need to do a little shimmy, but if you find for some reason that you're getting pretty close to the edge with your point, then you can just raise it a little bit and sew the seam. So after we've sewn those seams, we're going to have 2 bands of triangles. We're going to have the pink band and the green band. And just like magic, I have some that I have made earlier. And you can see I've got some different sizes here. So this is the same size as we've just made, and you can join them together to create a lightning bolt block. That's an interesting composition in of itself. You can swap them so that you have alternating edges. I could swap it round so that I've got a green background and a pink zigzag design there. Another option that you have available, rather than joining those 2 bands together to create a rectangular block, is that you can join them end to end. So what you would do is, remember how I said I leave myself some clearance at the edge? That gives me some flexibility. If I wanted to join these purple triangles together to make a band, I could put another triangle in that mix to keep the continuity of shapes. So if I was doing them in bands, then I could do row by row by row, which is how this work was assembled. The bottom row here, you can see are very small triangles. Similarly, the next row, then a wider band, a shorter band, or more narrow band, and a wider band. And very intentionally, I have irregular angles here. They're not designed to be perfectly nested. We're creating the energy by having variation in the angles. So down here, you can see I've got 2 steep peaks, then some wider bottoms, another steep peak, a wider bottom, and playing around with different variations is just part of the fun. So you start with 2 rectangles, you make an even number of cuts so that you create distinct triangle shapes. You give yourself some clearance at the end. When you do your cuts, then shimmy them up by 1/4 of an inch, sew them together in pairs, come back, trim off the ears, and then complete your banded triangles. As I said, that particular exercise is an extract from my geometrics workshop. I have a geometrics workshop coming up at a US-friendly time in August. The details are on my website, and I can see I have a little bit of time here, so I'll just quickly share with you. This is another quilt from the geometrics workshop. I also have the X Factor. It's for layer cakes, pre-cuts, and solids. Use your favorite fabric ranges or raid your scraps. I also have line dancing. Learn the moves to create fine, expressive lines. Fundamentally Circles is all about creating circular shapes without any pins or templates. It's liberating and it's fun. And the final workshop in the technique series is Strip Ease, where you have effective improvisational strip piecing to build up your own compositions. In addition, I have a workshop that is not technique based. It's a 4-module, 10-hour workshop over about 5 weeks. It's called Abstraction in Action, and it's all for students that are looking to develop their creative muscles. All the details are on my website, serendipitypatchwork.com.au. And hi there, Lyric, I can see you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. All of our teachers, I would love you to turn on your videos, wave hi to all our amazing viewers in Zoomland and in the YouTube live stream. This has been such a fabulous 2 days. We thank you so much, teachers, for sharing the amazing knowledge that you have, the amazing ability that you have to teach us through Zoom. So we hope you've had a great day. We would love it, love it, love it if all of our viewers went to globalquiltconnection.com, fill out the survey at the top, fill out a teacher recommendation, or what did we call it, Sue? I don't even remember the word, teacher something.
Testimonials.
Testimonial review. Make sure that your guild is signed up for the newsletter. And exciting news, we are planning on having another All-Star Sampler Platter with all new teachers in October. So thank you so much. Have one last video to share with you. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Hey friends, we hope you have enjoyed tonight's event. My name is Lyric Montgomery Kennard. Sue Bleiweiss and Mel Beach are my partners in this amazing adventure. Great big shout out to them, and especially to all the amazing teachers that you saw tonight. Hope to see you again sometime. Any of our Global Quilt Connection teachers would love to come work for your guild. Look us up and send us an email. We'd love to come to you from anywhere around the world. Did Did you know you don't have to wait for your guild to hire in a teacher to take advantage of the fabulous virtual classes that are out there? At globalquiltconnection.com, we have a list of teachers who are offering classes for individual quilters to sign up for. Grab a few friends, set up your own Zoom class. Everybody sign up for the class and work through it together on your own schedule. You have met the challenge. I dub thee defenders of the virtual quilt world. Go forth and conquer, my friends. Bye-bye. See you soon. That's all for now. Blah, 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 blah.